What's up, people? Welcome to a brand new and once again very special edition of Wrestle Update. I'm your host, Dylan Fox, as always, recording on this kind of warm, not a big fan of that, but a nice Sunday day anyway. And of course, I am joined by my good friend and your friend. We all love him. He loves us. Nello de Annalise. It's good to have you back, my friend. It's good to be back with you.
What's up? It's our one night stand. I'm excited. Wrestle Update one night stand. We're back. We're talking about all the classics like Crime Update and the NBA and the Yakuza Games series. You know, we're hitting all the big ones.
That's true. My co-host on, now that you brought that up, my co-host on Dramatic Dream Dragons, Sandre Bjorn, he just, for the first time ever, finished Yakuza Kiwami 2, which me and you have talked about off the air. I think you agreed with me, because I said that was the best one in the series. And was I correct that you agreed with that?
Yes. Totally agree.
And he was very down on it at first, because he was complaining about the gameplay and all of that. And I was like, listen, dude, I don't care about all that crap. Look at that ending of the game. That was one of the best storylines ever in video games. And he's like, yeah, it was. And so I have successfully converted yet another person into loving Karu Sayama on here, and also Yakuza Kiwami 2, and Yakuza as a whole, as a series. Although, let me ask you this. Did you beat the construction side quest to meet Muto and Fujinami and Shoshu and all that?
Yes, and I did the Justice storyline in Yakuza 6 as well, to fight like Okada and Tenkazi, Naito, Yano. So
they were all there.
Was also very fun. Yeah, I'm a geek over that stuff, man. I think it's such a cool cameo and inclusion.
Me too, and I didn't mind the game because we got into a fight over that too, because he was saying he didn't want to play the construction minigame. But I was like, no, it's not so bad. Like, it's worth it. And the 6 minigame is more like, it's kind of like that, but you're more direct. You know, like you're directly involved in addition to gathering up all this gang members and stuff like that. But I will say, to me, the Kiwami 2 storyline was way more realistic of Muto and Co. like buying a construction company. In 6, Okada's story was so ridiculous and over the top that I did love it in its own way. But it definitely wasn't realistic, of Okada having to avenge a girlfriend that got kidnapped by the Yakuza. Although his, I mean, that feels like a storyline we have not seen done. AEW needs to take notes. They need to play. That should have been his introduction to AEW. They should have brought over his Yakuza 6 storyline, had Omega involved and all of that. Like, they should have done that, in my opinion. But yeah, as Nello mentioned, this is a really special update. This is our first time that we're going back to a show in the past, and this is a distant past, and it's very timely. It's something we want to do more of. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time here. Maybe not this specific show, but I definitely wanted to take looks back. Me and you both, and I will shout out them because they deserve it, and it's like a very direct influence to the kind of show we're going to be doing today. I mean, even as a teenager, I really grew up and came up on Post Wrestling Now, back in the live audio wrestling days, Review Away, Rewind Away, whatever you want to call it. Those shows were directly influential to me as a podcaster and as a wrestling fan. And they did so much great work, John Pollock and Wei Ting did, and they still do to this day. Like you've mentioned before, you always listen to their show reviews of the modern day stuff. But I remember when they were only on, they didn't have their own show. They put them on the live audio wrestling shows on as a downloadable extra on there, and they would review old shows. It was a lot of fun. And now we're going to try to recapture that spirit in our own way and our own twist here, I would say. How do you feel about it? You've watched the show now, and we're going to get into it as a show for sure. But how do you feel about going back in the past? Was this a good idea or a dumb one on Dylan's part?
No, I love it. I watch more wrestling from the past than I do from today. So for me, it's always exciting to go back. I like to learn more, see more, touch on the memories and moments that really created the framework for which modern wrestling works off of.
I 100% agree. with all of that, although you said it more artistically than I would say. But for me, I think there's a great charm, not just to the show, but older wrestling in general, because I think as children of the 90s at this point, like, we automatically have an affinity for that era. I consider it one of the best times. Um, Although this show did take place in 2005, it really leaned heavily on the 90s spirit of things, I would say. Like, that was very obvious watching this show. Um, that kind of reminds me, I'm about to go off topic for a second here, so everyone bear with me. We had some family drama today, and I'm suddenly going to drag you into it, Nello. Um, so, um, Recently I ordered a pack of stickers I found online to to decorate my laptop with, because I've never done it before, and I'm trying to do it more now. And it was a sticker pack of a bunch of bands. They were all rock bands and stuff. Some of them from all the way back the Beatles to modern day, like Mayday Parade and My Chemical Romance, in this sticker package. I got the ones I wanted, those two bands specifically, and I let my sister. She's been on the show before. Shout out Cheyenne. I offered her the chance to pick out her favorites of the sticker package, and in it, she threw one band to the side, and I said, "What's up?" Pretty much like, why'd you throw them away? And I turned it over, and do you know the band that she was just disgusted by, that she would not even look at?
Who?
The Red Hot Chili Peppers.
There.
And that led to her saying, and I said, I just thought it was funny that they were specifically the band that she was negative towards, because they had a lot more stuff. But that led to her saying they are the worst band of all time. And suddenly, who hears that but our mother walking by, who freaks out and, like Booker T, says, "Tell me I didn't just hear that." And she goes on and on about how great the Chili Peppers are. I feel like, Nello, you may be siding with younger sister here, because I stayed neutral in all this. I did not jump in. I did not get involved. But it spanned a 20-minute argument over the status of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. My only addition to it was when my mom said that she was going on bragging about how Californication won a Grammy. And I said, that's not true. Stadium Arcadium was their album that won the Grammy. And she was like, I don't give a fuck. It should have won.
There's a really good Nick Cave quote where he says, "I'm forever near a stereo saying, what the fuck is this garbage?" And the answer is always Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Wow, backing up Cheyenne here. Going after them. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was inventive of them to go out on Danny California with a guitar solo. I mean, like, that's stupid when you think about it. But they actually kind of made it work, and I thought that was unique, at least. But that's about the nicest thing I can say. I liked a couple of songs from Stadium Arcadium. But Californication and all that old crap, I wasn't a fan of that at all, overall. But yes, I will let her know. She will be very pleased to know that you're on her side. No, but they did, as crappy as we may think of Californication, outside of my mom, they really were a 90s band. Would you agree with that? At least.
Yeah, like when I think about them, I definitely think of their 90s stuff more than their modern.
I don't know. I just found out that they released, I thought Stadium Arcadium was their last album, and that was 2006, to be honest. And to be fair, they are also a future WrestleMania theme song maker with Snow, Hey Yo, for WrestleMania 23 there. So, or was it 24? I think, now that I think about it. I think that was 24. Because they also had the Red Theory song. That was such a weird era of pay-per-views. One day we're going to get to all of these if things go well, for sure. Because I definitely loved to talk about that era in particular, as bad as it may be. Much like the Chili Peppers, in our opinion. But that said, they encompassed the spirit of the 90s. And so did ECW in many ways. June 12th, 2005, 20 years ago, 20-year anniversary of the show, and we are talking about it here to relive some of these memories. And I do think it's worth saying, and we kind of talked about this. I can't remember what. I think when we were talking about Sabu dying, rest in peace to him. But me and you are both kind of in the same boat. We weren't really big ECW fans growing up. I mean, I was still just a kid. And I knew that they had a show on TNN or whatever. But I always looked at them and I was like, ugh. Like who are these backyarders? Like that was even as a 10-year-old, that was kind of my reaction. Or probably less than 10. I was like 8 by the time probably 6, 7, whatever. But I was like, oh, like who are these backyard guys on TV? And I think the first thing I saw of them was they were playing like a hype video for Mikey Whipwreck, and I was so annoyed that he used the stunner. I was like, who's this motherfucker doing the Stone Cold Stunner on here? When I grew up, I realized that he was actually a really good worker, to be fair. So I was proven wrong as I grew older. But as a child, I was very annoyed at that. And I never really got into them after that. I obviously have memories of them in the horrible invasion. That's something I definitely would love to revisit one day with you, to talk about the invasion and all of the ways they fucked that up. But the fact of the matter, long story short, I knew their guys, like they had ECW guys that came over to WCW and WWE, but I wasn't a fan. Do you have any history with them? But before this show, obviously, we're going to talk about real time.
About ECW, right?
Yeah, ECW.
Yeah, like so I got into ECW in like the mid 2010s, early 2010s, maybe like 2013 probably.
Okay.
Through my neighbor Kevin Deers, actually, rest in peace, recently passed away. He was the
Oh, rest in peace.
he worked for Defy Pro Wrestling, actually. Amazing guy. And so I went over to his house to just get really stoned, and he put on Sabu Terry Funk, and I had never seen something like it at that point. And I was like, this is nuts, right? Like, this is absolutely insane. Like, the way that match ends, if you haven't seen it, it's not really a finish so much as like they're both just absolutely ensnared in barbed wire, and like the barbed wire is connected to their bodies. It's pretty crazy. So I don't know. I adored it. And after that, like I would watch like older I would watch clips and kind of just like random matches here and there, but I never really sat down and watched the TV or the pay-per-views all the way through. And I felt like if I did that, I'd be like, okay, this is, pushing my limits here, because as I've come to learn, there's a lot of fun stuff in ECW, but like any old wrestling, the majority of it kind of sucks. Um, and I say for old American wrestling, I should say, like there are highlights from the era, but it's very like, what's the term? Hagiographized, like, made to be saintly. We remember the best parts versus like, oh shit, this is what we actually had to endure for years. But I had an ECW title at one point.
Okay.
Yep. So I would say I'm an ECW fan for sure, but like not to the point where like there are people who like that's their promotion, right? Like I don't think ECW would scratch my top 10, but it's something that I still look back on fondly, as a wildly formative promotion. Like I think when you look at like 90s WCW, Attitude Era WWF, and ECW, I think like the one that has the most lasting impact on the industry is ECW that we still see. Like, when was the last time you heard a WCW chant on a show?
It never happened.
Yeah.
For many reasons, to be fair. But I definitely agree with that. I think no doubt after, like, since they've died, and again, we've grown older and wiser and all that stuff, I definitely grew a greater appreciation for it than what it was at the time. So you really never watched it live or anything like that, or had any, like for the time of this show, 2005 Raw or whatever, did you have any affinity for any of these people?
Definitely not Tommy Dreamer.
Yeah, his WWF run sucked.
Sabu, RVD,
Yeah.
and like Sandman for his entrance. But outside of that, there was like, like Justin Credible, Mikey Whipwreck, Balls Mahoney. Like these were not dudes that I was like familiar with in any meaningful way.
Yeah. I definitely felt the same way because, if you really hadn't seen ECW live, you would have no clue who, like, Sandman was. Pretty much. The only thing that you could say, I guess maybe if you saw him in WCW, but you don't want to do that. Like, you don't want to watch WCW. Nobody does. Except for me, because I'm from the South. Like, I said it with me and my old friend Fredo Esparza. WCW, we didn't choose it. It chose us by measure of us being born in the South. You have no commitment to WCW. Nello, you are not a Southern person. So you didn't have to suffer through that like I did. So other than that, though, at the time of this show, and later on, as I said, I really agree with what you said. I think its influence is still felt to this day. I mean, look no further than GCW. They try, they try very hard to recapture the vibe and what ECW was and the spirit of it. You could argue whether it's successful or not. It has its ups and downs for sure, I would say, but the influence is still there heavily. That does not happen with a lot of these other companies. If it was a WCW influence, it would be NWA. Like that's what it really would be. It wouldn't be WCW. It would be NWA, Rock and Roll Express type of stuff. Not the later WCW when Hardcore Hack, also known as Sandman, was in, and Raven. I loved Raven's WCW character where, like, they ended up going to his house and they just revealed he was doing his emo Raven bullshit promos, and then they went to his house and he would look at the camera and was like, I think it was Stevie Richards or somebody like that was there at his house and was like, "What's the deal, Raven? What's this big house you got? I thought you were this miserable guy." And Raven turns to the camera and is like, "What a mark on there." He's like, "This whole show is bullshit." I love WCW, but it never influenced anyone. Positively, anyway. But this show came to us from the Hammerstein Ballroom, legendary ECW venue. All the fans knew that. The way they built up to this show, this I have a very strong memory of. This may have been legit, Nello, 04, 05. That was like my era of being a WWE fan. Because WCW, well, like, no lie, like, WrestleMania 21 was the show that made me. I started wrestling at the end of that year, 2005. The thing that made me want to wrestle was Shelton Benjamin running up the ladder at WrestleMania 21. That was like one of my favorite moments of all time in life, let alone wrestling, I think. So this was my era. Like, I loved his whole run. Shelton was my favorite. Him being IC champion, having been one of the best IC champions, it ruled. They had Carlito in there. That was fun. Like, Cena was just starting his main event push, so he wasn't like overbearing yet or anything like that. We were getting out of the Triple H reign of terror that drove away 5 million fans. It never gets blamed for it. But we were getting away from all that bullshit and getting to actual good wrestlers doing stuff. Jericho, Christian was getting a big push. The women's wrestling was a lot better than it had been. I mean, it's still not where it is today by any stretch of imagination, but it was way above where it was just 3 or 4 years prior. So, like, we were, like, this was my era. Again, long story short, of Raw, especially SmackDown was the shits. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was like the Rene Dupree and Kenzo Suzuki tag champion era of SmackDown, and JBL as champion. That was some of the worst shit we've ever seen on TV. Heidenreich, like, nobody liked any of that. But I was into Raw, so I definitely remember the build up to this show. And because the matches were so, again, like, if you weren't an ECW fan, there were a lot of these guys you would have no idea who the hell these people are.
Yep.
So the way they built up to the show was they ran an invasion angle, which would play out on the show directly, where basically the GM Eric Bischoff on Raw was super pissed. They did this whole deal where it was like they tried to recreate WCW versus ECW, which I know that Bischoff didn't care about ECW that much, but he had no problem taking their wrestlers for WCW, as they would do. And we got a rare look at babyface Heyman in the middle of all this. But they ran a big angle on the go home show of all this because they basically did a month talking up that, hey, we're going to do an ECW tribute show. And it was all based on the rise and fall of ECW, a DVD WWE produced in 2004. It had interviews with all the people they had, like Stevie Richards and RVD, Dreamer, that WWE now employed, but were ECW originals or whatever. And it sold way better than they thought it would. And the story goes that RVD himself actually went to Vince and was like, hey, like this DVD sold. And remember, this is 2004. Nowadays, this would never happen. But DVDs were a big part of, profits at that time. Like they really meant something back then to all movies and especially wrestling DVDs. That would never happen now. But at the time, it sold a lot. And RVD was saying, hey, Vince, like, this could be something we could do something with. We can make some money off of this. And Vince McMahon did agree to it. And it's kind of the real story of ECW. Because I think, like you said, ECW is super romanticized by its hardcore fans. And in reality, the WWE influence on ECW, even the original ECW, was way more than anyone knew about. They were bankrolling the promotion. Meanwhile, Heyman was going on saying how no one can sell out to WWE, and yet he was taking a check every month from Vince McMahon to fund it. Until he took a final paycheck from McMahon and then left everyone high and dry and never paid anyone on there, which is Heyman is known for. But on this show, like, I really got the sense, like, yes, it did have the fans were ECW fans. Like, they felt like the 90s ECW fans. But this show, like, half of it felt like shoot promos up and down, like, more than anything else. Half of the guys on it were WWE guys. This felt like a true, in my opinion, I can totally understand why the ECW fans have such an affinity for the show. Because it was a one-night return to form, so to speak. But when I watched this, again, having 20 years removed from it, not really being a fan at the time of ECW, like you said, we grew to appreciate it more later, even though I think it's kind of overrated. So even now. But still, there was a lot of great stuff on there, in all seriousness. To me, this was a WWE show. Like, when I watched it, like, there was no doubt of that in my mind. Yes, the fans were a little, like, rowdier, I suppose. But when you look at the talent on here, the way they held the show, the way they formatted the show, this did not feel that different from a regular WWE pay-per-view that you would see in 2005, in my opinion. Do you agree or disagree with my overall feeling on it?
No, I totally agree. Yes, like, it's it is like I have my spreadsheets for all of my wrestling ratings, and the tabs are promotion, competitors, and rating. And for promotion, I still had to put WWE for this show. It's only ECW and title, right? However, I expected something way more patronizing than this. Because, like, for me, WWE ECW, I think about December to Dismember. Is that the name of it?
Yes. One of the worst shows of any company of all time. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, it was very different than I thought, and it seemed like people were really fucking into it.
They were. Like, that's true. That's the main difference, is the fans, to me, more than the content of the show. This definitely felt like something where the fans and the wrestlers bought in. I'm purely stating as the way they produced the show. They didn't really go all out to make it different camera angles or anything like that. And I mean, there's been a ton of ECW tribute shows over the years. This would not have reached the heights it did without the WWE's backing. Like, in all honesty, it would have been another, hardcore heaven or whatever, like, revival that they did. And obviously, like, there's no comparison between this and December to Dismember. I mean, that was legitimately one of the worst shows ever. That was a fully WWE version of ECW. This at least had the spirit because the fans and the wrestlers bought in. Even if the office, it's more like they meddled with the show too much, is really what I'm saying. Like, they could have left it alone and make it be a full ECW show, but instead they tried to WWE-ize it with the invasion angle, which from a business standpoint, I really understand. Like, you want to get your normal fans like up to date and on board with it. And I think you kind of get it. And I thought it was interesting that they made them the baby faces in the invasion angle. As I said, Heyman was the baby face. Bischoff led a crew of people that were, anti-ECW crusaders or whatever. And he was basically saying, Heyman, you suck. Your promotion sucked. Like, you went out of business. And you were running bingo halls. All that bullshit that they always say. And Heyman was like, it's not about me. It's about ECW. And it led to the go home angle where Bischoff led his crew. It was like Edge and Christian and like the coach were his big backup, Jonathan Coachman, to fight the ECW guys. And Heyman ran out and all the ECW guys came from the crowd. And they ended up, in the end, beating out the Raw guys, putting up a big flag over the ropes that said ECW lives or something like that. And of course, we had our favorite wrestling song, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, play, both on Raw and on this show numerous times. You have to think that... Another thing we have to mention, the entrances are edited on the network version or the Peacock version or whatever. You watch it, but they're easily able to find, too, if you look online. Especially the Sandman one is very much worth checking out online, rather than the edited version that they had. But they did this whole deal. JBL hated them on SmackDown, Bischoff hated them on Raw, and they're coming to fuck up the show. And that would be a storyline. I do like, I will say, this actually kind of reminded me of Deadly Game, like Survivor Series 98. In that, well, this show was a lot better wrestling-wise than that, I will say. But that show had a storyline thread the whole night of Mankind being the corporate champion and how that would play out with Rock being revealed as the real one at the end. This had an all-night storyline thread from the show. Like, from the beginning to end, they constantly mentioned the invaders and all that stuff. And it led to the end where it perfectly wrapped it up and tied it into a bow, pretty much. But that was a storyline heading in. Like, they're going to invade ECW. How is that going to play out? So, I will say right away, the vibe of the show, again, from the fans, is what made this really special, in my opinion. The first thing we see is Joey Styles, who is the longtime ECW commentator. He comes in, he says his "oh my god" catchphrase, and he's like, this is going to be the most extreme night ever. And they pair him up with the aforementioned Mankind. Mick Foley is on commentary here. What do you think about Joey and Foley as a commentating duo throughout the show?
Foley played Rocky Romero and Joey Styles was Chris Charlton.
That's that's a really great comparison, actually. If you're not familiar with ECW and you like New Japan, that's exactly right. Pretty much.
Yeah. Styles was going fully in on the character, the brand, the promotion, the tribalism, the hatred for anyone that backstabbed the company, while Foley was there to sort of put everyone over, and for the most part, and he was there for the most part, and sorry, I just had someone walk into my studio. He was he really balanced it out, you know.
If someone's breaking in, let us know. I will come there to rescue you.
Thank you.
But I will say this. um, I liked Foley on commentary. I thought he did a good job in that Rocky role, as you mentioned. And Joey, much like Chris on the New Japan show, was grating at times, to be honest. But if I'm an ECW purist, that's what I want, though. Like, I want him to be over the top and on my side. Same thing if I were a New Japan diehard fan. I want Chris Charlton to bury AEW. Like, fuck AEW would be how I would want that to be portrayed in the nature of that show. And in this show, like, I want the guy who loves ECW, who hates WWE, and I want him to be the cheerleader and speak for me as a fan, which he was very effective at on this show. Even though it was a little over the top sometimes and annoying, to be honest. But that's kind of his style, right? Like, he was always kind of that way. And he was the Raw commentator at this time. Like, this is and one of many of the times JR was in Vince's doghouse. They had the 3-man team of Joey Styles, King, and Coach was on commentary at certain points for that as well. And the year after, we would get a shoot promo from Joey that with him quitting Raw for One Night Stand 06. Maybe next year we'll be talking about that as well. But here he comes out, cuts an emotional promo. You could tell that ECW meant something to him. That was legit. And I think that's kind of a good dichotomy for the whole show, too. Because there were certain guys, like the ECW originals, like they put their heart and soul into this show. And then there were kind of like guys who, maybe they were in ECW, but really they're WWE wrestlers. I don't think their heart was in it as much as the ECW originals or whatever. So the first thing we do have to say here on this show is that when it comes to this show, it did another, like much like the DVD sales, the buy rate was better than expected. Again, the fans really showed up and bought into this. 333,000 people relatively ordered the show at a really down period. This was like a really bad time for WWE as a company. Like, even I remember WrestleMania 19 only did like 600,000 buys or something at the time, which was historically low. Just a couple of years prior, this was obviously a sold-out show, 2,500 people at Hammerstein. But the show starts off after the commentator's introduction with Chris Jericho versus Lance Storm. Old buddies from, they broke into the business together. And Dawn Marie came out with Lance Storm. Jericho got introduced as the Lionheart, which would pave the way for his AEW run 20 years later, when he would bring back his old gimmicks. This is the night he would bring back his old gimmicks here, bringing back the Lionheart gimmick that he did wear in ECW, of course. The funny thing is, I think this is kind of a problem with some of the WWE guys. Jericho wasn't with ECW that long. Like, that was a pretty minor stop on his run. Like, same thing with Ray. But he was there, so that was enough to make him an ECW original. He was much more known, in my opinion, for his WCW run rather than the ECW one. But regardless, that's the story of the show. They come in, they do the ECW standoff. That's a very copied spot. We've seen it a million times by now. Even back then, it was probably something that wasn't done in WWE. But if you were an indie fan, you watched IWA Mid-South or Ring of Honor, like, you recognized it right away. The crowd is, like, super hot here. They do, forgive me for saying this, but they do chant that Dawn Marie is a crack whore on here, which was, like, wild. Like, because that would never happen today under any circumstances to see. So to see that in place, I knew that, like, okay, I'm not in Kansas anymore with this ECW crowd. But they go crazy, rag on Dawn Marie. They wrestle a good match here. They do kind of a prototype. Obviously, this is not the Jericho of today either. This was the Jericho of 05, which was like, I thought he was a really great wrestler, to be honest with you. So I thought he looked really good. Lance looked pretty good as well. They go on. Storm hits like a really good drop kick at one point. Gets the super kick, and then suddenly Jason Knight and Just Incredible run in, and I definitely was like, "Oh yeah, like Just Incredible and that other guy, like Jason Knight." I was like, "I don't know who this is, but whatever." I know they were part of like the Triple Threat in ECW, so they're all in a faction. In the end, Just Incredible hits him with the kendo stick, or the Singapore cane, I suppose, in ECW. And Storm ends up getting the win. 7.5 minutes here. And at the end, they end up chanting the Lionheart for Jericho. So we see the return of the Impact players. But what about you? What'd you think of this match here?
I liked it. Good opening match. Both guys that you can rely on for good work rate. You brought up the drop kick, but there were a few different drop kick spots in this match that were all really impressive and fairly devastating. Crowd was incredibly hot. How did you feel about the finish?
I mean, if this were a weekly show and this was a pay-per-view, I would say it was lame. But for this particular show, I think it's good because Jericho puts over his friend. They even said on commentary, they're like, this could be Lance Storm's like retirement match. Like he might not wrestle again after this. I know that he was more like a trainer back then. He was really wrapping up his WWE time by this point. It wasn't his last match. He came back multiple times from Ring of Honor and stuff and ran his own school. But for this, you got him a feel-good win. You got the return of a classic ECW act in the Impact players, and you got to protect Jericho, even though he was on his way out too. Like he would be out by the summer to leave to tour with Fozzy, and he'd be gone for a couple of years. So I thought it made sense for the purpose of this show, but it wasn't. I would obviously prefer a clean finish. What about you?
No, I liked it. It gave me faith in the show that the ECW originals were going to be going over, and that
a good point.
Like WWE knew how to book this show, so I thought it was a good step in the right direction just to kick it off.
I wonder who specifically booked this show, because I don't think it would be Vince. Like, would Heyman have been like the one involved in all that? You think?
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like I said, this was kind of like a really down period for the company as a whole. What do you think of Lance Storm in general as a wrestler?
He's not someone that I've ever he's always been a tertiary WWE guy to me, just because I've never seen his work otherwise. So, if you say that he's someone I should explore more, I'll study his work more.
I think my favorite period of his was actually at WCW when he led Team Canada. For whatever reason, like Vince Russo loved him some Lance Storm, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. He'd be like the opposite of who you would think. But I got a huge kick out of him. If I could be serious for a minute, like super easy heat in the late 90s, early 2000s era. And they actually made him a triple champion, including taking the hardcore title and renaming it the Saskatchewan Hardcore Invitational title. So big shout out to Saskatchewan, and the first shit chant that we'd have superhero in training. The WWE would steal later on for that. But yeah, they gave him a big push, and I liked him then. I would never say, in my opinion, he's a really light worker, like for the most part. The super kick is good. I thought the roll into the crab was like a really cool move that he had. Like, he's a good worker. I wouldn't say great. And I don't have too many matches. I thought he was consistently in the 3 to 3.5 star range as a worker, which back then was probably one of the better ones on the roster. Again, you got to understand, this was not an era of work rate that you would expect. Even, and I kind of said it when we did about the State of the Union address or whatever show we did. this is like by far the best era of work rate that WWE's ever had. Back in the 2000s, that was not a priority at all. So he did stand out a little bit from then. But in general, though, I think he's a good mid-card player, but he's not someone I consider special overall. And obviously, as a like charisma and all that stuff, it's very low. Like that's kind of his thing. He's like so straight-laced as a person. I don't know, because I used to read his website. I mean, this is like when I first got the internet, late 2000s, early 2010s. He would post a lot about wrestling on there and say his things. He was usually like really mad if somebody hit an unprotected chair shot. Don't watch this show, Lance, if you don't like that. But there was a time where he was taking all these fan questions and stuff, and all of his answers were like the most robotic, straight-laced guy. Like, he's probably never drinking a soda before, let alone been any kind of like drug guy or alcohol abuser. Like, he seems like a guy who's never done anything fun in his life, pretty much. So that kind of amuses me in its own way, and that ended up killing his career in WWE because you had the classic Stone Cold coming out saying he was boring directly on TV, and be like, "Man, Lance Storm, you suck. You're so boring. I'll fall asleep watching you." And then he literally came out on the stage and put a pillow and a blanket at the top of the stage and fell asleep during his match. That somehow did not get Lance over. And then they had him do the dancing gimmick, which I know that he hated. Like, they were trying to get him to quit the company with that. But yeah, he's okay. Like, he's a good worker. I wouldn't say great, long story short. But I think he's worth talking about. And I did really like the triple champion angle in WCW. I thought he was really good at that. Everything else, I wasn't a huge fan of his. So then we see Pitbull, Gary Wolf, coming in, and he talks about how, ECW had a lot of legends, and unfortunately they're not all going to be here tonight. And they play a tribute video showing like all the people that died. You had a bunch of guys on there. You got Terry Gordy in this video. Crash Holly was there. The original Sheik. Rocco Rock of Public Enemy was there. And then the last one was Candido. And the fans give a huge Chris Candido chant. And he had actually just died, like, right before this show happened. Like, a couple of weeks before this show. He had, like, a leg surgery that ended up having some complications and got infected or something like that. And unfortunately, he passed away. And he was in TNA at the time. And it was just a very sad thing. He was only like 33 years old. So that's a very sad thing. But, obviously now 20 years later, a lot more have passed, unfortunately. I mean, we just are coming off of the Sabu death. Rest in peace to all of them there. But I thought it was cool that they did this. This is another thing that I think separated it from your typical WWE show at the time. To shout out everybody. They've done tribute videos for tons of people before, but not to this extent of everybody like that. I thought it was very nice. So then from there, we move on to the three-way dance. You got Tajiri, Super Crazy, and Little Guido, who was Nunzio at the time in WWE. I think that, I forgot to mention too that first they bring up that like, the SmackDown and Raw guys, they're not here yet, but they're going to be here soon. And then they bring in this triple threat stuff. Tajiri's coming out. They got the Sinister Minister with him and Mikey Whipwreck. I had no idea James Mitchell managed Tajiri in ECW, and I love it. Like, what a ridiculous pairing that is. Guido's coming in with the whole FBI. We can see Tracy Smothers out here, rest in peace. There, but I thought it was so cool to see him. You got Tony Mamaluke and JT Smith, and then Super Crazy just has nobody with him. I just thought it was funny. You had like a whole gang with Nunzio, and then Tajiri had his guys, and then Super Crazy's just like, hey, I'm Super Crazy. They do it. Here's the problem with this match. Like, the action was good and all, and they did a ton, but this was like a 5-minute match for an elimination match here. It's 6 minutes and 14 seconds.
There was really no matches that even, God, let me see, that maybe went over 10 minutes sans the main event.
Yeah, the only one was Benoit and Eddie, and everything else was 6 minutes. And then even Awesome Tanaka was only just below 10.
Yep. Yeah, Eddie and Benoit go 10:38 and the main event goes 10:13. They were the matches were not long. When I saw that the show was only 2:30 and that there was like 8 matches, I was like, okay.
what was the rush, I wonder? Like, they could have given us 20 minutes more of action to make it a 3-hour show.
Yeah, who knows?
Much like December to Dismember, which famously went short. Like, that went almost an hour short, and a bunch of people tried to get refunds of it. But this wasn't as bad as that. Yeah, I mean, it was a prototypical spot fest, but we have to analyze it in the eyes of a 2005 viewer. But even then, I feel like, I mean, we did get the moonsault off the balcony. That's what this match really was all about. Let Super Crazy jump off the balcony.
That was so. Once he did that, I was like, "Oh my god, he did this at the GCW Hammerstein show," but I had no idea it was a callback because he flips off the same exact spot too. So I thought that was really cool. But look, there are no matches to me that were bad on this show. Everything to me, it was so elevated by the crowd and the energy. And there was really no bad wrestling on this show that, like, I went pretty much a flat 3 for everything, because to me, like, that's your basis for like a fine match, right? Like, it's going to hit the notes. There's nothing overtly bad about it. And yeah, you had so many people coming out here that it was really about, this match was really just about all of the people you're going to get to see coming out versus just the 3 guys, because that was a constant too, is you'll have 2 guys in a match and there's 20 guys around the ring, so it's just about getting everyone in, really.
Whipwreck hitting the stunner off the second rope was pretty cool, though, I will say, or the whippersnapper as he calls it. That was a good elimination. I know that Tajiri and Crazy had like this like rivalry in ECW. That's something people always bring up, because they're always like, yeah, ECW, it wasn't just about hardcore. They had great technical wrestling too. Just look at Crazy and Tajiri. So they come in there. At one point, Styles says, "Oh Dios mío," and they're like, "Oh my God," but in Spanish. Very crazy, which was very funny. This was fun. Like, there was nothing wrong with it for sure. But it was just too fast. I would love to see them get 10 more minutes and what they could have done with it. But yeah, it was good. And like you said, the crowd, I mean, me and you could have had a 5-star match to this crowd, I feel like, if we did it. Like, they were just ready to love everything here.
So long as it was ECW.
Yeah, well, they hated you if you were not ECW.
Oh, dude, they hated you.
Yeah, exactly. So I really love that vibe from the crowd. Again, I'm with you. That's the point I was kind of making earlier. The show itself is not what makes this special, watching it. It's the vibe and the fans that make this show, in my opinion, has made this ascend to such a legendary status. But yeah, the moonsault off the balcony was cool. So do you have any thoughts on these 3? Tajiri, Crazy, and Guido here?
Yeah, they rule. And aren't these the 3 same guys that we saw on that GCW show, actually?
Yeah, it may have been. Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember the GCW version, but other than they were there. I definitely remember them there. I think Guido's kind of historically underrated. Like, he did shoot style wrestling in Japan. Always a big bumper, and did stuff like that. Later became a referee. I think his character was really, they weren't going to buy into that like WWE. But as a comedy stooge undercard guy, he did make a role for himself for a few years in that cruiserweight division. Crazy. He's good. Like, like a good flying guy. Lots of fun. I mean, his name's super crazy. So automatically everyone will love him. I think just on that alone, let alone the fact that he does cool shit. So he gets that. Tajiri got by far the biggest WWE run of these three. Like, he was a guy that they could actually, like, pull out. Like, usually he was in the undercard, but he was a guy that they could pull out and be like, hey, like, we need a random one-shot title shot guy. And then Tajiri would be who they would turn to that oftentimes. I remember it happened with Stone Cold once, where he gave him a title shot when Stone Cold was the heel. And then it happened again with Triple H, where they did a whole show around Tajiri getting a title shot. And then they did a real match in Japan with Tajiri versus Triple H, which got unearthed on WWE Vault, the YouTube channel. They put the whole match up. It's like a 23-minute match. It's pretty good stuff. And I'm somebody who hates Triple H's guts in all of his matches. But I still liked it. I thought Tajiri did a great job in there. So Tajiri, definitely a memorable character with the Mist of the modern era. And that obviously led to, him going back to Japan. And I really think he's fallen off over the years. But that said, he does do good work with Kyushu Pro and deserves his status as a legendary figure in the world of wrestling. And even came back from the Cruiserweight Classic that one year. Yep. Like a few, 7 years ago or whatever. So then they play another hype video. This time, just showing a bunch of ECW moments. They show Shane Douglas throwing the belt down. I'm pretty sure he's refused to come back for this show. For two, Shane Douglas. Or I think maybe it's just because he was a TNA at the time. But I know they did something in the future where it said, didn't he try to run his own version of an ECW tribute show to fight a one night stand? I feel like, was it this one or the next year he did that? But he led an anti-ECW reunion on there. They show Tommy Dreamer getting his ass beat by Sandman. The public enemy spot where all the fans threw all the chairs into the ring. Terry Funk was there. They showed all kinds of moments there. A BWO. And the whole crowd is chanting ECW. Like, they love, just this video got the fans. This is a bigger pop than pretty much anything you'll see on Money in the Bank when we watch it next week or last week or whenever it happens. I don't even remember. But regardless, they did a good thing too here because, again, maybe if you are just a diehard WWE fan in 2005, they sold you on this through the angles on Raw and SmackDown, but you don't really know that much about ECW. It's good. Like, you can watch this right away. And once again, not because of the show itself or the content of the show, but because of reliving the 90s and the fans going crazy, this made it feel way more special than any other show at the time. And even shows in 2025, it feels more special because of them. So then we get to Psychosis taking on Rey Mysterio Jr., a legendary rivalry, not just at ECW, they wrestled all over the world. But for the purposes of this show, like, they are an ECW rivalry here. And the same thing I said about the three-way dance, I would say with this here. Psychosis comes out with his mask. He gives it up to the fans. And that Joey says that they've wrestled 500 times. I wonder how true that is on there. Overall, I think that may be a little, exaggerated. Let's see what Cage Match has to say about it. No, here. How many matches of theirs are listed on Cage Match?
I have no
129. It says, I'm looking it up.
I'm supposed to guess this.
No, it was a rhetorical question, of course. That would be crazy if you knew offhand, though. But yeah, 129 matches have had. 129, 500. Who's counting? At the time, they didn't have Cage Match back then. to look this stuff up, the fact check early on. But that's why you tune into Wrestle Update. I will fact check you even 20 years later, Joey Styles. Don't think you can escape from it. They do some stuff. They do another like standoff spot. The crowd's buying into this, chanting for him. The crowd ragged on Psychosis. They said, "Put the mask on!" Like they were chanting big heavily. They started to boo Psychosis more. Mysterio comes in with the seated senton, drop kick, 619. Which funny, they actually booed the 619. Did you notice that? Like they didn't like this lame 619 finisher, but he ends up hitting the splash for the win here. For a 6-minute match, it was good. But if you want to watch their matches in from the 90s. I would say more so than this one.
Yes, 100%. This has a 5.8 on Cage Match. I didn't think it was that bad. This is the lowest rated match on the card. I think when you compare it to their other matches, it definitely pales in comparison. But this was still fun. This is maybe the one where the crowd was not a fan of who went over in the end. I think, like you said, that was very evident in the 619 because they just knew Psychosis seemed to be their guy. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I didn't think this was as bad as everyone else said.
It wasn't bad at all. It was just too short. In my opinion, anyway. Like I would say it's like a 3-star match. Well, what about you?
I go 6.
Yeah, 6 out of 10. Yeah, I think that's about where I'd be at as well. I'd hear, which isn't that far off. It's 5.90, so it's a good match that could have been better. Watch their match at Bash of the Beach '96 though. In WCW, that was a fantastic match. They also had some matches in ECW and even in Mexico that would be well worth watching. Even on J-Cup, you had Ray make an appearance there. Ray and Psychosis 90. So, good stuff. I guess they see Ray as more like a WWE guy than an ECW guy. He's another one that was not there very long. And the 619 is such a he never did that in WWE, or excuse me, in WCW or ECW. He did it as a fake out. When somebody was on the outside, he would do that the 619 fake out, the Tiger fake kick. But then in WWE, he made it his finisher. And it is kind of a dumb move when you think about it. It's better as the fake out, in my opinion. So I can get why the ECW guys don't like it. So that said, that leads to the SmackDown invaders coming in. You see Kurt Angle and JBL. They showed these seats earlier too. That was there were empty seats when they were talking about them coming, and then they have the SmackDown crew showed up, and they're Orlando, Jordan in here, and all this bullcrap that they had at the time. SmackDown was a god awful show in 2005. They do the spot where they bring up hey, we have tickets. We bought our tickets for this show, and then the crowd chants "Fuck off, SmackDown." And Foley says that they can't repeat that, but the fans are making their feelings known about SmackDown. I agree. SmackDown does need to fuck off. But I actually think the invasion angle, again, was kind of smart. Part of me wishes that it was a straight-up ECW show with minimal involvement. But also, at the time, I kind of applaud them. And let's be honest. At the very least, that gave the fans a villain. Rather than just cheering all their old favorites. Now you actually had people that they could hate. And I think that made the show better. Would you agree?
Yes.
More highlights from ECW's run. You had Stone Cold with hair in there. He was stunning Steve Austin back then. Jerry the King Lawler in there. Benoit broke Sabu's neck, and Sabu fought through it anyway. Tommy Dreamer pile driving Beulah McGillicuddy to lead to him finally beating Raven. again, I didn't watch this at the time, but I followed it later. I know that was one of the biggest ECW angles. Was like Raven and Tommy Dreamer's storyline. And him beating him was this legendary moment. I've heard some people say they wish Dreamer never beat him. Just because that would make his character more interesting and tragic. But I don't care. Like, he got to power drive Beulah and then marry her. So that's an interesting way to meet your future wife. There. Wrestling is kind of crazy. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, yeah.
But that's okay. We love it anyway. And then Taz winning the ECW belt. Another legendary moment. A good way to pay off that angle. They see this cool video. Then they talk to the SmackDown guys. Kurt grabs the microphone. JBL throws him out of the balcony, shoves him to the ground. It was like, "Fuck you, Joel Gertner," on there. And Kurt cuts this shoot promo, the first of many shoot promos. Well, I guess Joey's promo was the shoot promo. But now we get another one, the second of many. Kurt goes on and he says, ECW is the worst thing that humanity ever created, and ECW is the lowest form of scum walking the earth. He said, "You all suck." The fans chant, "You suck dick," at Angle, and then he says, "Your mother showed me how." So Angle admitting that he sucks dick to the ECW crowd. We like that progressive nature of Kurt saying, "No problem, don't judge me for it." I like that your mama showed me how. I like it. He's like, "The last time I was here, this show sucked so much I walked out halfway through. And you morons watched it the whole time." That was another famous ECW moment where they ended up crucifying the Sandman, which is extremely blasphemous. And as I understand it, Kurt Angle is a man of God, and he didn't like this. And he said, "Fuck this, I'm out of here." And they were like, "Please come back, Kurt, we're sorry." And he's like, "No." So that led to him going to WWE. We could live in a society where if they had not done that stupid crucifixion angle, Kurt could have been an ECW wrestler and never even came to WWE. What do you think could have happened then if Kurt was an ECW guy instead of a WWE wrestler?
Would have been really interesting because they sort of thrived off those weird hybrid guys who weren't like, I mean, because you look at all their stars and none of them are like wrestlers for the most sense. Like Rob Van Dam's a martial arts guy. Sabu has such a hardcore resume. Dreamer and like, God, I'm trying to think of who else, but like they're not really
Sandman, like
they're
exactly. Like the everyman.
Exactly, they're like dudes who can just like flip people or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that stuff was interesting. But yeah, I don't know. Angle, I think, would have really thrived. So like, I mean, because he's good no matter where he goes, right? He really comes into the role. Maybe he helps out, when they're on television more.
I think the thing that would have been really different for him is we never would have gotten like goofball Kurt Angle. Like I don't think there's any way Heyman would have booked him like that. How WWE did, like with the milk truck and all that bullshit they did. Like I don't think we would have ever gotten to see that. And I think his career might have been more taken more seriously because of it. But everybody respects him anyway. Like even with all that stuff, they recognize what a great worker he is. So, what do you think about his promo here and the fans going back and forth? Because this stuff was like my highlight of the show for all of this. But yeah, Angle, he's like, nobody can stop us. Like SmackDown is gonna ruin ECW. And then they give the mic to JBL, and immediately the crowd is booing him. Huge they chant asshole at him. And JBL was all like, "This show would have had no fans, but because of me, like the show sells out. If you put my name on the marquee, the show sells out. Which, if you follow his title run, you know that is a complete load of bullshit. He didn't have very many sellouts in his days as champion, let me tell you. And definitely not having good ratings. He was one of the worst drawing champions ever at that, actually. But sure, JBL. He's going on about the fans, and he's going on because they're all chanting "You suck dick" at him, and he's like, "There's not one woman in attendance at this show here," and he's like skewering the fans, kind of actually. And this was tremendously entertaining, in my opinion. But he's like, "I'm above all that. I don't mess with you guys because I'm a wrestling god." Blah blah blah, and nobody in ECW will ever make it to the level I'm at. The fans boo. I love this. I love this whole promo. Like, I thought they were both awesome. The crowd made this awesome. I loved it. What do you think of the promo battle here between the SmackDown guys and the crowd?
Super fun. Like, these to me are the highlights of the show outside of, a specific match on here. It's really just about the moments that they're able to create. And the crowd is so volatile and passionate that, like, it's anarchy in the arena 24/7, baby.
Yeah, that's true. Like I said, but yeah, we did get some casual homophobia here from JBL going out to far back. I mean, it's 05. We know that it's going to happen. So, but it is worth warning because it was kind of unsettling. Like, this wouldn't happen today, for sure. But still, as JBL, he's a fucking asshole. So we expected. But yeah, so then RVD comes out. And I know that he said before on interviews that he hated all of this stuff about the WWE guys coming in because he didn't want people like JBL taking credit for what ECW built or whatever. And once again, anybody who knows the history knows JBL gets no credit for drawing anything. Although his promo was very good. I mean, I will give him that. But so RVD comes out. His leg's in a brace because of the injury, and the crowd is going crazy chanting RVD. And he said, he's like looking at the SmackDown guy, and he's like, "This show is not a WWE show at all. We're tired of assholes like JBL being shoved down everyone's throats when we watch wrestling." Well, I mean, that's true. As I said, his run was terrible. Never mind not drawing. I don't know if you ever saw his champion, but I thought his run really sucked, to be honest. With the cabinet, I mean, listen, nobody wanted the Basham brothers in a main event spot or Orlando Jordan, but that is what JBL's push brought us. So the crowd chants for ECW. He agrees with me that JBL deserves no credit, and he said that for once, for the first time in years, no creative geniuses are writing the script tonight. He says, "I'm about to take us back to the 90s, a time where I could talk, to where I could say more than just cool and dude," which they would repeat from Matt Riddle a decade plus later. I do love how he goes on here and shoots on the writing staff of WWE Live on their show too, which is very good. And he's like, "It used to be fans chanted my name through the whole show," and he's like, "I am the whole show, Mr. Monday Night, blah, blah, blah." He goes on about how, like, the best time of my career was in ECW. WWE doesn't know how to use me, and I'm the one who went to Vince, and I knew that it would be huge. He said that we don't need storylines, just one night only. And he said because of that, the dream became real. And he was like, "I'm hurt right now, and missing this show's worse than missing out on WrestleMania, Japan, Booker T's wedding." And then suddenly Rhino comes in and gores RVD. Then the lights go out. Sabu's here. RVD got out of the ring, and that sets up the next match. So we get the Heyman special, where one segment leads to a match. What did you think of the RVD promo and then the interruption between Rhino and Sabu?
Real cool way to like go directly into the match. Whenever I think of Sabu, I think of RVD. Whenever I think of RVD, I think of Sabu. Knowing how One Night Stand 2006 plays out, this was sort of a cool precursor to it. RVD misses it. The next year, he's going to go against the company's biggest face or heel, depending on how you feel about him at that show, to win the world title. It's a really cool, difference that a year makes. This started the match off really hot, though. I thought it was cool. What about you?
This is something Heyman would always do at ECW. A promo or a segment leading to a brawl that led to the next match, so you could save time not doing entrances, but make it feel a little bit more natural. I thought RVD's promo, this had to be one of the best promos I've ever seen of his. I don't regard him as any kind of great promo. In my opinion, I didn't like his stuff at TNA. I thought he kind of sucked, actually. And in WWE, he just never got a chance. But here, he got to speak from the heart. He got to boost his ego, which he also does in real life in his shoot interviews as well. But regardless, I thought it was a great promo. I thought it was great that he interrupted JBL too, who got massive nuclear heat talking shit to the fans. So that was cool. You got the coach, Bill Afonso, there too. You got that. I thought the build-up was great. You got to see a gore from Rhino, and you got to do the Sabu blackout. Again, that's one of the first things I think about. Like, if you asked me, you said, like, what are some of the standout characters of ECW and moments? That would be one of the first things I would say. And they did make time to get that on here. The whole segment was like great. I love the heat for the SmackDown guys. RVD's promo was really good. Then you set up a classic angle with Sabu. So they come in. They have a typical match. He blasts Rhino with a shot to the head. Again, steel chair shot right to the head there. Rhino looked for the gore, but Sabu pulled the ref in front of him to get the gore to protect him from it. RVD did some stuff with the chair. I hit the running drop kick with the chair. And he ended up hitting the Arabian facebuster through the table to get the win. Sabu did. Another short match, but great pace. The crowd heat was nuclear for this whole match. They loved all of this shit. And it felt like a huge deal here. A 6.39 rating on Cage Match here as well. So a little bit higher than Ray and Psychosis. But yeah, it was good.
Rest in peace, Sabu.
Absolutely agree on that. For sure. So definitely fun stuff. It was great to see that you get to see Sabu, RVD, Fonzie all together. It felt like a huge deal. Joey Styles was putting them over big. He talked about the original Sheik being so involved in both of their careers. And it was just like perfect for what they wanted it to be. We cut to Al Snow backstage, and he tells us that wrestling sucks and only promos draw in wrestling. Oh wait, no, that was the OVW segment. He comes in saying that he has Head with him, and he's like, SmackDown sucks. Like ECW was the best company, and that's what this night was about. And they have another ECW video, and it focuses on Sabu and Taz. It was awesome. It made it seem like this huge deal. I thought they did a great job with all of the videos. Then Raw guys come in next, and Bischoff leads his guys in, and Edge and Christian are there. And Styles goes off on Edge. He was like, "Thank God I didn't bring my wife here since Edge has showed up." Which, obviously, this was near the peak of the whole real life Edge, Matt Hardy, and Lita drama. And they definitely played into it. And this was at the point I think Matt was fired from WWE, actually. Which, when you really think about it, how fucked up was that whole situation? Like, you have a guy who cheats on his wife to steal his best friend's girlfriend, and then they fire the guy that got cheated on because Vince didn't think he was manly enough or whatever. What a fucked up like viewpoint that was. But then it did lead to a huge push for both guys in terms of wrestling, so there is that, I suppose, out of it. Although at the time they didn't really follow up with Matt as well as they could have. Again, I said at the start of the show, this was like my era of WWE. I was like a huge Matt Hardy fan. I felt so bad for him because of that, for real. I was just a teenager, but I was like, come on, man. Like, come on, Matt. But they didn't. And they did some of the best work shoot angles ever when he jumped the guardrail. Like, I thought that was real for sure. He even shouted out Ring of Honor on 2005 Raw. So they were making a big deal out of that. Matt was fired, but Edge was here, and everybody knew that he was a piece of shit in real life. So they go on. And then even Foley comes in, and he talks shit about Bischoff coming in. He's like, he never does anything right anyway, just like when he tried to kill ECW the first time. And then he said, then Joey comes in and says, oh my God, it's Coach. Now I'm really scared. Were they pushing Coach as a wrestler here at some point? Because why was he such a big part of this? Like, they couldn't have found any other heel to be on part of this group instead of the commentator. But whatever. Although Coachman was like a good heel at the time because he was so unlikable, there was no redeeming value to his character at all. So I guess from that standpoint, it works. They stand up next to the SmackDown guys, and they like. This is another time period where Raw and SmackDown, the brand split actually meant something. This would be the start of a storyline that would lead to the Survivor Series Raw versus SmackDown angle, which is one of the best versions of this that they've ever done, actually, in 2005. So this is the start of that. So then we get the sounds of Our Lady Peace coming out. Benoit is here. He takes on Eddie Guerrero, and I guess we'll have to jump on the elephant in the room here. What were kind of your feelings watching Benoit?
It's definitely the first time I've watched him in a very long time. Like, here's the thing on Benoit for me. He was not like, and anytime you hear a story about him and stuff, he sounds like a really mean fucking guy. Like forcing Paul London and Brian Kendrick to like fucking shovel down food and like behave a certain way, and like
and he got pissed because Kendrick ordered pancakes or something. He was like, "What's that fun time pancake bullshit?"
Yeah, like he's such an old schooler in terms of like locker room shit and all that. Like, I don't care, like, how good a wrestler is in the ring. If they're just a piece of shit, then they're a piece of shit.
Yeah. And
so, like, I'm not someone that really enjoys Benoit or is able to, like, see the quality through the person.
Right. I will say, I mean, this is the first time I think we've ever discussed this. And I think this may be one of the only times I've discussed this ever. I may have briefly talked about it when we reviewed the J-Cups on Eastern Lariat many years ago. I was a huge fan of Benoit. Like, before everything happened how I did, he was one of my favorite guys. Like, as a wrestling talent. And I'm not going to run from that or lie about it. Like, I was a huge fan of his wrestling. I think, him as a person, you see different stories from all kinds of people. Even London in his interviews, he does tell that story, but also talks about how he does respect him. And, like he did respect him a lot and looked up to him as a performer and what he meant to the locker room. There's obviously a lot of horror stories about him just being a gigantic, asshole. You can look at it even in the 05 Rumble. They were coming off of, like, Tough Enough, but not the original version with Maven. It was the second version where Miz was in it, and they had Daniel Puder. They had him take a Rumble spot that year. The first thing they did was, like, Benoit and Hardcore Holly were in the ring. because Pewter had all kinds of heat backstage. Like everyone hated him, and especially at that time, people like those guys, JBL and all that. The fact that these guys were coming in on a reality show rather than grinding, in front of wrestling in front of 10 people and all that bullshit, they automatically hated these guys and took it out on them. And they just beat the fuck out of Pewter in the Rumble, and we all know how hardcore Holly is. But Benoit did the same thing, like just beating his ass. They did the stuff. I mean, obviously there was a lot with in WCW with Sullivan. But yeah, like I said, as a wrestler, I was a really big fan of his. And when that happened, that was one of the darker days that I can remember ever in wrestling. Like, I don't know, where were you at when that happened? Like, in terms of a wrestling fan in 07? Were you watching, or were you out, or did you just not watch WWE? Where were you at, Nello, in the June 2007 where all that happened?
Like I definitely heard about it, but I wasn't an active fan at the time. So
Yeah.
I honestly have no memory of like how I felt or how I reacted. So yeah, my apologies.
No, don't apologize at all. Again, first of all, that was a really shitty time of wrestling, like especially on TV. TNA was in a real down point. WWE sucked. This is like the Randy Orton reign of terror, and I definitely don't blame you for not wanting to watch all that. But I remember the tribute show they did on Raw that night, and I mean, me and Ken watched this. My great grandpa, and Benoit was his favorite too. Like, he loved Benoit and Eddie. Like, we were all WCW guys. So I mean, like, we cried that night, dude. Like, because we didn't know that he had killed his family. Like, we just thought he died. And remember, also, this was at the time. Speaking of horrible television, they were doing the Vince had died angle where they blew up his limo. And even at the time, me and Ken, we would talk about it every week. We'd be like, "Can you believe this bullshit that they're putting on here? They're trying to make us think Vince is dead. Like, this is crazy." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Raw lately." like that was worse than like some of the bullshit they did in the early 2000s. But we hated all that. And then suddenly, like, Benoit comes up. At first, we thought it was like a work. Like, oh fuck, Benoit, like, they're killing off people now on the show. But they had Vince in the middle of an empty arena, and he was like, "One of our, like, top stars died, and we will not do a show tonight." And we were like, "What the fuck?" And like, because they broke up they broke kayfabe because he was supposed to be dead at the time of the show. And then the next thing we see is him standing in the middle of the ring saying, "No, this is not a storyline," much like with Owen, which is another terrible thing that I witnessed. Being a wrestling fan, but he was in the middle of the ring, and we cried that night, dude. They actually showed one of his Pegasus, like, wild Pegasus matches in Japan. I think it was against Black Tiger. I can't remember who they had, but they showed him. It may have been Liger, but they showed some Japan match that he had on Raw, and I was like, they had Taz commentating it. And they had tributes every night, and there's the famous one where Regal kind of implies that like he already knows what had happened. Everyone else is very sad and stuff, and he's like all very suspicious. Don't judge a book by its cover, or no, don't think you know what you know, or something like that. Like, that's what everyone points to, and he's told the story that they had basically all of the roster come in and shoot pre-tapes to play on the show. And right before Regal was walking in, JBL was walking out, and he said, "Hey, Regal, you think Chris did it?" And then just walked off, and Regal's like, "What the fuck?" Like, "No, I didn't think that at all."
Fucking JBL thing ever, dude. Just, like, that would shake me to the core before an interview. What else are you gonna think about?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, nobody can blame Regal for thinking that. What an asshole JBL is. Like. But that was a crazy day. I'm sure nobody knew how to respond over that, to be fair. But it was very sad. And then I used to be a big fan of listening because I used to stay up all night listening to sports talk radio. And they were actually talking about Benoit on there, and they never talked about wrestling on Fox Sports Radio or whatever I was listening to at the time. in 2007. And then somebody came in and said that they said what had happened, that he murdered his family. And I was like, no, like, no, this can't be true. Like, I even in my mind, I was thinking, is this some sort of convoluted storyline that Vince has come up with? Like, this can't be real. And unfortunately, that led to like a really crazy period. I know there was a lot of speculation going on at the time. The Benoit thing is a whole other can of worms. Like, maybe we'll get into that deeper one day. But there was a lot of speculation going on, and it was just a really sad time. I don't actively seek out his wrestling, and it's kind of hard. It's not hard for me to watch, I would say. Like, I can watch this match and take it for what it is. I can recognize that he is what he is and the terrible things that he did, and he should never be forgiven. And can never be forgiven. But I can just watch the matches for what they are and just kind of take it from an analytical approach, more so than thinking with my heart overall. But I can never get invested with my heart. I remember last year we were going to do a series. We talked about it off the air. We were going to do a show on 30. Like, I wanted to do like all of the WrestleManias, like maybe 5, 10, 20 years prior. Kind of a good look to where we were at, or maybe even last year. Like, 1 year prior. We didn't really get that far in it because, Nello had to go with his game and stuff. But 20 was obviously WrestleMania 40. 20 was 20 years beforehand. I don't know if I've ever been quite as emotional ever as of the ending of WrestleMania 20, where Benoit and Eddie were in the ring with the belts, because that felt like a huge trap that I never thought would happen. And then just a few years later to see what happened, it was devastating for me. But the fact is, I take the personal part out of it and just analyze it for what it is. So I didn't have any problem watching it, but I will say that it's hard because that's obviously going to be what you think about. You're not going to think about any great matches he has when he comes out. You're going to think, this is a murderer, like a man who killed his wife and child and himself. And so that's going to override whatever personal feelings you may have, even if you try to not look at it. But I didn't have a problem watching this, I will say. So these two obviously had a long-term friendship. And I have to say, I'm actually kind of glad this is the match we watched, because if we watched WrestleMania 20, my fear is that I would have feelings that I don't want to feel, over that. And that nostalgia would kick in anyway, and I don't want it to, And I would come on here and say, yes, all that happened, but fuck, this was an amazing match from a pure wrestling standpoint. And I haven't watched that main event ever, so I don't know if it is or isn't. But with this match, I can confidently say, taking everything out of it, about what happened and the horrible crimes he's committed, this match still wasn't that good, actually. I thought this was the worst match on the show on its own.
Again, like Rey and Psychosis, right? This is not going to be the match that you're hoping for. This is not AJ and Nakamura from Wrestle Kingdom. This is AJ and Nakamura from whatever
WrestleMania.
Fastlane. Not even WrestleMania, Fastlane or whatever the fuck came after it. It's this is, when you look at the card, on paper, Awesome Tanaka, that's the one I'm looking forward to the most. But when you look at and you assume work rate, this would probably be the best match on the card, and it just wasn't. And I think when people like this perform under expectations, it's going to be a lot harsher of a critique.
And that is the thing. Obviously, these two, especially in 2005, before everything happened, these were two of the most respected workers on the roster. They start off going on with Joey saying that this was the one match Heyman wanted to put in ECW, but he never got around to it. He said Heyman always knew they'd be world champions. This was unfortunately just a few months before Eddie's passing at the end of 2005 as well. And I have to say, he in particular looked really rough here. If obviously we're watching with 2020 hindsight, but it's hard for me not to watch this and see like, man, something feels like it's wrong right now with Eddie watching this match. The crowd started to hijack the match, going after Edge, as they showed Edge on the screen, and they said they chanted, "You fucked Lita," at him. How is that a put down? Like, you just praised him for having sex. Like, that's not a. You get an F on the insult scale from ECW here. The crowd's going crazy for these two. I will say that. They chant back and forth for both Benoit and Eddie. They do a spot where they show Bischoff on there. They're pissed off at him too. And they say, "Fuck you, Bischoff." I think it's another thing that took away because they kept showing the WWE guys. They made it more about the storyline because the crowd wanted to love these guys, but they help but hate the WWE guys more than they love them, pretty much. And this is another case where, let's be honest, neither of these two are ECW guys, to be honest with you. And once again, I would much more associate them both with WCW than ECW if you're doing a nostalgia trip. Like, sure, they were there for some shows. Obviously, you have the Eddie Malenko. That's one of the most famous ECW rivalries. But I don't consider them ECW guys, really. So they were more apt to hate on the WWE guys, even though they respected these two's game. So I actually thought, again, never mind what happened. I just don't think this was that great of a match. I actually think if you watch this match, you could see Eddie say something like, "I owe you." Like, for this one, because he's like, "Yeah, this match sucked." And it's come out in interviews afterwards, too, that Benoit in particular was devastated about how this didn't live up to what he thought the match would be. Because they didn't have a ton of singles matches in their catalog in WWE. So he really wanted this one to be special, and it just fell short. They knew it, and I knew it watching 20 years later. And obviously, all of the stuff surrounding Benoit is just horrific. But again, I tried to just rate it as it is, and I still don't think it's that good ultimately. And it's a shame that Eddie was going through so much health stuff. I really wish, in hindsight, again, we're looking back in hindsight, and that's dumb when you think about it. But I wish that he had just taken some time off, and just tried to heal his body the best he could. And who knows if it would have made any difference. But I just don't think whatever was going on with him, he wasn't in it here. They did have the ladder match, the famous Dominic match, like the Dominic ladder match a couple of months later. And yeah, I could have lived without that, actually. He should have just taken some time off and not done that whole Dominic angle. I think would have been for the best. But yeah. 6.27 rating. I mean, even among the inmates, this is only rated higher than Raid Psychosis, so it's in contention for the worst match of the night. And I think there were a lot of reasons for that. The way they booked it out with showing the WWE guys, the fact that these guys weren't their guys, and just for whatever reason, these guys were just not on their game on this night overall. But that said, Joel Gertner goes back up to interview Bischoff. And Gertner is very funny here. Where he looks like he's about to say, "I've seen what you've been saying about ECW on Raw." And he looks like he's about to clock Bischoff. And then he's like, "Will you please hire me for Raw?" On there. I thought that was really funny. Bischoff says, "Hell no." Bischoff goes on. And this was another one where, Kurt and JBL, they weren't, they did announce that they were coming. They didn't like ECW. But with Bischoff, literally his whole character arc for the month was feuding with Heyman and ECW as a whole, pretty much. And he was like, "Fuck this bullshit." And he was saying, Raw is the #1 wrestling show. Again, another, subtle tease to cause friction between SmackDown and Raw there. I did like that. There too, but it wasn't as memorable as the JBL and Kurt promos, in my opinion. There was a funny part I noted too, where when he's walking out, somebody's like, one of the ECW fans in the crowd are like, "Fuck you, Bischoff," and then Bischoff's like, "Fuck you, buddy," and it's like, "Fuck you, buddy." Like that's exactly what you'd say to somebody telling you to fuck off. Do you have any thoughts on Bischoff's role here as another instigator? He's kind of like the de facto leader by the end of the instigators.
Yeah, I got some words about Eric Bischoff. Okay. So no, Bischoff plays his role here to a T, as we'll get to it in the finale. He's the big bad. You know, WCW is the guy that is the entity that stole their guys and made Mike Awesome 70s fat chick lover. And, you know,
that was awful.
It's WWE. They're the guys that brought ECW back. We're not going to, these guys are cool, man. Those guys are cool. But Eric Bischoff, bro, fuck him. Yeah, I don't know. This
whole show, when you think about it, was actually the whole purpose of it was to be a psyop against Eric Bischoff to make him hated by ECW fans more than WWE.
Yeah, which is maybe Vince didn't book it, you know, after all.
Man, like unbelievable.
He's like, Paul, look, you can have the book for this and the match card so long as you just absolutely drag Bischoff across the board.
And Heyman was like, sure. Like, I have no problem doing that whatsoever.
Yeah. All right. Sign me up.
So then that leads to Masato Tanaka coming out. Which the fact that he does have a WWE appearance under his mantle is very awesome. I do have to say. This is another one. These guys were like the top stars of ECW after everybody left. Like, you know, they were kind of like the last big rivalry that ECW had. So they brought it back for this show, and you know, around that 2000 era, again, when all the big names had left, these guys were like killing it against each other, just doing some great work. This is where Joey goes crazy on Mike Awesome. Like he just rants and raves on Mike Awesome.
Dude, this is where it became too much for me.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't know if it's just because of what happened, because I always forget the line where he says it's a shame he didn't kill himself or succeed in killing himself. And that's like, it always sticks out like this dark fucking cloud.
Yeah. So the context of that was like Awesome did the suicide dive, and he was like, it's unfortunate he wasn't successful in that. In committing suicide. And unfortunately, that did happen a couple of years later. I believe Joey has expressed remorse over that. But it was again, at the time of the ECW era, I mean, we've had chants calling people crackheads, talking about STDs, saying fuck your mother, and like all kinds of stuff on this show with this crowd. So it was that ECW 90s experience again, where I mean, when we grew up as kids, it was like the Old West out there. Like, I heard some crazy shit that would not be said today anywhere. I said about me and people I knew and everything. And it's unfortunate that happened, like you said, because regardless of the thing, it's unfortunate because you never want to see someone take their own life ever. But for it to come out like this was definitely like, when he said that, I was like, oh, like, ugh. Like it just... it gives you an automatic reaction. I'm somebody who's been impacted by suicide myself in the past, not just attempts or anything on my part, but my cousin last year committed suicide, and that's something I dealt with. So when you see this kind of being said so flippantly, it really does hit home. And I think that's something that I'm so glad that would never fly today ever. Like. Even if there is no evidence, again, like he couldn't have known, like to be honest with you, that would happen. If he had known, he probably wouldn't have said it. But even now, even just as a joke or anything like that, that would never be okay today, and I'm very glad about that. But even besides that line, he was still kind of annoying, to be honest with you about that. He just went on, and this is when even Foley was like, calm down, Joey, pretty much. But I do think that he hated him for real for quote unquote betraying ECW. if it was me, I wouldn't begrudge Mike Awesome for that at all. I'd be like, fuck Heyman. He's not going to pay anybody. Like, he's not just awesome. He didn't pay.
That's a big thing too. Is Paul Heyman comes out and like he is so praised and lauded.
Yeah,
and it's like this is the guy that fucked up the company. Like this
and
is the
so
guy,
many people's lives.
And so many people's lives. He's the reason why ECW doesn't exist. He's the reason why so many of your favorites are broken down and left without a career. Like, man, fuck Paul Heyman. For real. Like,
yeah, we'll tell you, he's about to come up. But I just remember on that DVD, they had a segment with Stevie Richards where he was all like, the reason he went to WCW in the first place was in their famous Barely Legal triple threat, which he's a part of. Terry Funk hit him with the guardrail, and it like fucked up his spine and his neck. He had a serious neck injury, and Heyman wouldn't pay him like to get that fixed or even looked at. He tells a story where Heyman sent Stevie up to New York and was like, "Hey, I know a doctor who will help you out on the cheap, but he's like top class. He's just a guy I know. Go to this address, and that's where he's at." And he went there, and it was like it was a Subway or something like that. So he got a meatball sub when he was supposed to get a neck surgery because Heyman lied to him directly. And Stevie was like, "Man, I don't know if I can stay at ECW anymore." So then on that DVD, Stevie's there apologizing and be like, "I really wish I hadn't left ECW. I feel bad because I betrayed Heyman and the boys in the back." Fuck that shit. If it was me, and you're gonna send me to some sub shop and try to get me to sign a contract with nothing on it, fuck you, Heyman. that would be me. Like, I would have lasted like these ECW guys, but I don't know what about him makes him this master manipulator, because everyone praises him when he's done so much fucked up stuff, and he loved ECW so much that he went to film fucking Rollerball, and when everyone wondered where he was at, he said he was negotiating a contract, and he didn't contact anyone until he came out on Raw to replace King as commentator with JR. Which, admittedly, he was a great pair with JR as a commentator. But still, that's besides the point. The point is, he didn't give a fuck about ECW. He just used it to make lots of money and fuck all these people over on there. And that's the truth. Like, what you said is so right. The one who killed ECW was Paul Heyman, more than anyone else. Don't blame Mike Awesome or Stevie or whoever left ECW to go to a bigger place. That's fucking bullshit. And even if you were a fan, that's something I'm never a big fan of even nowadays. Like, I get it. Like, I totally get why if you're a fan, especially if you're an indie fan, your opinion is to fuck WWE and even fuck AEW to a lesser extent. But at the end of the day, these guys are trying to change their lives for the better. Like, you're not going to make that kind of money in anywhere else. So I never begrudge a wrestler for jumping ship or going to a bigger company. And I think it sucked that a lot of these fans like took it so hard, and people like Joey Styles thought he betrayed the business or whatever. Man, Paul Heyman betrayed these people by ruining their lives, in my opinion. But anyway, and they go on. They cut to the Raw guys, and they all turn their back to the ring, which I thought was a great heel spot. So they're not watching the match. So many chair shots to the head here. If you're squeamish about that sort of thing, beware this match. I would say. Awesome brings the table up. He hits the awesome bomb through the table on the floor. You get the oh my god from Joey. The spot looked incredible, even for modern standards. They both grab steel chairs and start swinging at each other. And Mike Awesome just crushes Tanaka with this chair over and over. And Tanaka doesn't go down. He's like the ultimate badass. Here, you get the diamond dust from Tanaka, and then hits a tornado into a bunch of chairs on the ground. Tanaka goes up with a chair to the top rope, smashes it into his face like a 187, like New Jack, who was not on the show. the reason New Jack was on the show, have you heard this story about the time New Jack tried out to WWE?
No, please tell me.
So this was around 2005, and it may be 2004, but late 2004, early 2005. They brought in New Jack for a tryout match, and which is insane that they would even consider this. But that's how bad things got in 2004. That they were like, we need New Jack. But they bring him up, and he's going up backstage preparing for his match or whatever. And Dean Malenko, who was one of the agents at the time, walks up to New Jack and he said, like, you know, Jack, good to have you here. You know, your match is written on the whiteboard over there. You know, we'll set you up in the dark match. Vince will get a look at you. I'm sure you'll get a job. You know, like, I know that we all want you. Or, like, a lot of people backstage want you. Not we all, but a lot of people want you. And he's like, the one thing you can't do, no matter what, because it's the show day, don't go up and talk to Vince, no matter what, unless the building's on fire. And so the first thing that happens when Vince walks into the building is New Jack walks up to Vince. And it was like, hey, Vince, everybody told me about you. I'm so glad to be here. I can't wait to do a match, blah, blah, blah. But because he did that, by the time he walked back to the whiteboard, they had already erased New Jack's name off of it.
Oh my God.
So he was not brought in for any one-night stand shows, unfortunately. But Tanaka trade tribute him with the 187 here. They show like the WWE guys, they're like laughing at them, which was a dick move, but fit their characters at the same way. And it's like, this is a stunt show. Joey goes in and is like, man, awesome. Can you believe that fat chick thriller shit he was doing in WCW? And Foley was like, WCW did a lot of bad things, Joey, which is accurate. That was a pretty bad one, to be fair. He hits another tornado DDT, this time through the table, which looked awesome. The crowd ends up giving them a standing ovation after the awesome bomb, and then dives onto him for the win on the floor. The crowd chanted, "This match rules! This match rules!" Like, prototype, this is awesome chants, I think. This match rules. How come that never caught on as a chant?
So I noticed that as well, and I was like, I've never heard this before.
Yeah, me either.
Can you think of another show where they said that?
No, it's always "This is awesome." Like, that's what I always remember. But this must have been pre "This is awesome."
Yeah.
Which I'm trying to remember the first time I ever heard that. I think it would have to be some kind of Ring of Honor show, like that would get chanted. But it wasn't as prevalent. Like nowadays, almost every show has a "This is awesome" chant. Back then, it was like once a year. Like a company might get a "This is awesome" chant, but yeah, this match rules at the end. But this was the best match on the show. I think, like far and away. What'd you think?
This is a 5-star match. This is one of my all-time favorite matches. This is the best match that they ever had. When I look at pro wrestling, I think of rivalries more often than not. I think of, an Okada Omega, a Hangman Swerve. Like, what are the rivalries in the multi-match series that really encapsulate pro wrestling? And from FMW to ECW to this revival to even fucking MLW and 01, Tanaka and Mike Awesome waged war for pretty much a decade. And this is like the ultimate swan song, not just for Mike Awesome, but for their feud as a whole. And it holds a lot of emotional weight for me, especially because I'm such a Mike Awesome mark. And just in terms of, the finale, right? Like they hit at all of the greatest hits, but it doesn't feel like a get your shit in type thing. It feels like these are two dudes who murdered each other for a long time and they're willing to put it in and take some of the gnarliest bumps again. Like the finish is one of my favorite finishes because, he awesome bombs Tanaka out of the ring. and the camera is just on Tanaka, who's on the floor outside of the ring. They don't cut, they hold the shot, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Awesome just fucking dives right on top of him, and you have no idea that
awesome.
he's coming, because they hold the shot. There's no cut to the ring where you're seeing him run and do the dive or anything like that. He just comes out of nowhere and just, there's some really crazy table bumps. Of course, one of the gnarliest ones is when Awesome power bombs Tanaka off the top rope onto an already broken table, because the metal on it is already broken in such a way that, like, if Awesome didn't get Tanaka as far as he did, he would have fucking impaled him. Like, it's crazy. But to me, this is a perfect wrestling match. It's one of my favorites, and I was so excited to rewatch it coming into this show.
Yeah. To me, this is what ECW is about. Like, to me, like, if you watch one ECW match, this is the match I would show them even above the regular, like, the 90s ECW. And there was, like, great moments and stuff, and these two themselves had great matches in ECW. And like you said, it was a great rivalry. I would say their other one that I would point to would probably be November to Remember 99, their match for the ECW World title, which was a banger for sure. But I think this was it was definitely 5 stars for what they wanted to accomplish. Like, it was perfect for what they wanted to do. This might not be to everybody's taste, I get that, but if you look at the context of the match, everything going on in their careers, everything that was going on in their lives and their rivalry, and the show itself, like, this was absolutely perfect. And that finish is incredible. So, if you are somebody that's not going to worry, be safety police, and just watch it, and again, there wasn't any kind of, like, crazy psychology, but who cares? Like, it was a banger. It was absolutely what it needed to be. The fans gave it a standing ovation at the end. I think the WWE guys look like idiots, like, when they cut to him and were mocking the match. I think this worked on every single possible level, to be honest. Very cool that they got to have this moment. Probably more people watch this than any of their other matches. Well, so yeah, that was awesome. By far the match of the night. It's no surprise this is remembered so fondly. It's got a 9.04 rating on Cage Match. Feel free to give it very high marks if you would like. Anybody listening to this. We get more bodies to play after this. Drowning Pool is just all over the place.
Yeah, what a lame use of bodies, honestly.
For this show?
Yeah. I mean, when you see what AEW did with it, shit, they do nothing with bodies here.
No, it's just background music. I always think of, like, SummerSlam 2001 when I think of that song in wrestling. But we texted earlier in the week. I was saying, how many times did WWE use this damn song? You had SummerSlam, you had this song, and then they made it the theme song for the show. Like, when they brought ECW back as a TV show on Sci-Fi. Like, this has to be the most played song in WWE history, and maybe wrestling history, in terms of, like, a non-entrance. Nobody uses it as the intro, their entrance theme that I know of note. But for WWE as a company, they love this song for some fucking reason. Why though? What made this so special to WWE to the point that AEW could use it 20 years later and it still gets a huge pop? Is it just a zeitgeist of the era? Is this song... How many songs on the Red Hot Chili Peppers discography would you put above Bodies in your playlist?
None.
This is better than every single Red Hot Chili Pepper song.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cheyenne's going to love this. What would I tell her about it? Because her counterpoint, not to go back to this, she was saying how music evolved past them, and her counterpoint was that 3 Days Grace were a far superior band to the Chili Peppers. Do you also agree with that?
Man, for, like, that sort of, like, emo alternative rock, Yeah, I would
They at
say
least had a
so.
lane. They had a lane that they stayed in. Listen,
Yep.
Animal I've Become is a fucking great song. Okay. I'm a big fan of the SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 soundtrack, which they had like 2 or 3 songs on. But that was the best one, for sure. And so, yes, okay, so I will give you that. We didn't get any. Well, like I said, they did have multiple songs on the video game soundtrack, but I don't remember them ever, like, highlighting a pay per view like Bodies did. So we get more of that. They cut to Joey Styles and Mick Foley, and they cut a heartfelt promo saying the reason this show took place is because the ECW DVD got bought so much. So thanks for the fans for picking that up and making it and opening their eyes, pretty much. Then we get the ECW. This is extreme music. Here comes Paul Heyman himself, the man we just shit on a few minutes prior to this. They say the crowd chants, "Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul." Comes in, and he's like, "I'm not crying, but I was fresh off smoking a joint with RVD backstage. That's why my eyes are red." And they chant big for him. He cuts a promo saying that Todd Gordon is the one that gave me a chance in the first place. The ones that made the TV show, the fans are the craziest bastards I ever met. And I love each and every one of you, which he was lying about. All of this was lies. He's telling in this promo, but whatever. Paul E. chant comes in. The fans love it. He goes, he says, "I want to talk to the guys in WWE." And he's like, "Bischoff, I see you up there. And unlike you, I didn't invite you to my." Yeah, he said something like, "I didn't invite an owner of another company to my show," much like Bischoff did at Slamboree '98 when he challenged Vince McMahon to a match on there. And so he's like, "You're in my house now, bitch." And Bischoff gave him a middle finger, which is funny. And then he goes, "Hide your wives, it's Edge." And he said, like, nobody who got their promo written for them has the balls to say this. But I got 2 words for you, Edge. Matt freaking Hardy. That gets a huge pop. Edge spits out his beer. Comical reaction. That is 3 words, to be fair. There,
Yep.
so another lie that Paul Heyman is told, even in the midst of this promo. And then even Edge himself says, "Hey, that was 3 words." more than him saying, bringing up Lita. He was like, "Hey, that's 3 words. What are you talking about?" Heyman goes off of JBL, and he's like, "Since you want to shoot, cowboy, the only reason you were WWE champ is because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays." And JBL was like, "Oh, fuck you." Never deal at the upstairs part or whatever. And he's like, "This isn't WCW, Raw, SmackDown, or even WWE. This, my friends, is EC fucking W." And yeah, I mean, again, say what you want about how truthful this man is, or the content of his heart or his character. This was a great promo, and like perfect for what it wanted to be to the fans. What did you think about the boss coming out and cutting the promo here on everyone?
My favorite part was the Tuesday comment, and I think still speaks volumes about why Triple H hates AEW so much, because they moved NXT to Tuesdays.
It all dates back to Heyman saying this.
Yep, and it's I fucking hate Heyman. This was a really fun promo that got the crowd hyped. I can't deny that. Just not for me overall, because again, it just feels so performative and fake. Like,
Totally.
He's the farthest thing from a punk outcast, outlaw rebel. He's the biggest fucking bootlicking capitalist pig backstabbing scum that like Carney Wrestling produces.
That all may be true. But at the end of the day, I hate Triple H more than him. So I will take his side in this very particular case. I think we have to acknowledge that fact. JBL's reaction, the WWE guy's reaction playing along with it, was pretty funny, to be fair. It also kind of shows you that this had to have been, in all honesty, this had to have actually been rehearsed in some way, because Edge knew that line was coming to do the beer spit take, right? So it may have just been he's like, hey Edge, I'm going to say this about you. You cool with it? And Edge was like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, he's fired anyway. Fuck that geek, Matt Hardy. And so it at least shows you that had to be part of it. But it was a great ass promo. So then we get to the main event. The Dudley boys come out with the tie-dye shirts, not the camo. Tommy Dreamer comes out, and he's doing his thing. Then Sandman goes crazy here. And this is definitely the entrance that you should watch online and not the Peacock version.
Ask, how did you watch this?
I watched it on Peacock, but I specifically went online to watch the entrance of some guys, and this was definitely the top one.
I wound up grabbing like one of those fan-made, like, so it's the Netflix rip with the original pay-per-view audio dubbed over it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got the Sandman entrance as well here. It was very important.
It's just nowhere near the same.
One of my favorite commentary calls, if not my favorite on the whole show, Joey Styles is like, Sandman's bleeding and the man, he hasn't even gotten to the ring. Because Sandman's just smashing fucking cans on his head and he's fully just bleeding by the time he gets to the ring.
He got to the ring faster here than that Janela Sabu match, to be fair.
Hey, he had to kill even some time there.
Yeah. Like this crowd totally bought in. They sang the whole song. I'm not even a fan. To me, I think Metallica to me is what the Chili Peppers are to you, where I was never a fan of theirs at all. But there's no way you could watch this entrance and not think, damn, this motherfucker has an aura like no other here. Yep. The fans went crazy. I liked how he pointed the kendo stick at the WWE guys. It was like, come on, we'll do this right now, motherfuckers. It made him look like a badass. A great way to use all of this. So they come in. Joey again says, this is probably going to be Dreamer's retirement match. I'm pretty sure he's still wrestling in TNA. And dude, if not, he was
so fucking funny. This is it for Tommy Dreamer. This is the big... Oh my God. If only. Only.
Little did we know what was to come for Mr. TNA in the future.
Our digital media champion.
The heart and soul of TNA is what he would grow. But I will admit, when they brought back ECW as a show, him as like the only, like once they did it when like Christian was in and Yoshitatsu and all that bullshit, when he was like the last true ECW guy, I thought he was actually good in that role. Because he was just a normal guy who was like the last hanger-on of an old era. But obviously he had a lot of bullshit leading up to this show, for sure. And just before the match starts, who comes out but the BWO? You get Stevie Richards, Nova, and the Blue Meanie. And this is when it started to get real for me because I knew what was going to come at the end. And I was like, I can't wait to see how this plays out. A BWO chant from the crowd. And Stevie says, 3 simple words. We're taking over. He hits the Stevie kick. Dreamer. Then everybody beats the shit out of the BWO. Kid Cash runs out. Balls Mahoney's there. Axel Rotten comes in. Everybody's hitting everybody with steel chairs. Kid Cash does his like flip dive onto everybody off the referee's back. Classic ECW spot. And like this is a great way to like get all of these mid card ECW like fan favorite people like Cash, Balls, Axel Rotten. I thought it was a great idea to start off. Do you have any feelings on any of these, or any thoughts of these guys that came out? Maybe not.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me realize that.
Okay.
I don't really have any affinity or like loyalty to like all of these ECW guys. Like if this was the ICW crew, like this Bobby Beverly and Hoodfoot, I'd be freaking out. But Balls Mahoney, just incredible. They just don't quite do it for me. This was real fun though, in terms of like we're gonna get every single person on this show, just because I think that's something that's fun as a fan. Like for me at least when I went to AEW Double or Nothing, Tanahashi didn't do anything except hit a sling blade, right? And just show up.
Yeah.
But that was one of the coolest things that I got to see on the whole show because I got to see Hiroshi Tanahashi live, right?
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate the fact that they got all these people on the show still in some capacity.
No, I totally I totally get you there. Uh, do you think? What if they got Ian Rotten on the show in addition to Axel?
Oh man, they do another Taipei death match. That would have
Yeah.
been perfect. The New York Commission would have loved it.
Oh yeah. Uh, so much as if the show didn't have enough like asshole, like horrible people on it. Ian Rotten was the one missing. Uh, I was a fan of Kid Cash, to be honest with you. Uh, I met him before, and he was somebody that was around like my area. Later on, not necessarily when I was wrestling, but after he left WWE, and he was a really great worker in ring, kind of underrated, I have to say.
So
Uh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm a Chris Cash guy, and I always confuse these two. Can you help me finally understand the difference?
Well, Chris Cash was C's, and Kid Cash is with K.
But Kid Cash was an ECW guy. I know Chris Cash was a CZW guy, but
Yeah,
so Kid Cash is older, ECW original.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, he had to be. I mean, God, Chris Cash, he died when he was like 20 years old or something, right?
Yeah, Chris Cash died young because ECW started, or CZW started those memorial shows in like 2005 or some shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a sad story, but yeah, I remember those days. I mean, he probably passed away not that long before or after the show. Like you said, 2005. So yeah. Uh, but yeah, like I don't know if there's any real relation to them or anything like that. I don't think it is because Chris Cash, he was like a Jersey guy, right?
I would assume so, yeah. No, and it's
Yeah,
not that I assume that there's like a relation or anything. I
yeah.
just, their names are so close that it almost sounds like they're the same dude with just different gimmicks, is what I've just always conflated.
No, I mean he was a lot different. Obviously, who knows what he could have became. But Kid Cash, he was like an ECW guy. I think around this time he was still maybe he was fired from TNA. I know he had a lot of problems backstage. His personality rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I remember he came out where he gave an interview where he was like, uh, "I'm sick of TNA. All they do is push AJ Styles. They don't give a fuck about any of the X Division guys. Like he doesn't deserve to be at the top of the X Division." And I was like, I don't know about that. There. If there's anybody that should have been pushed in TNA, it's probably him. But whatever. Uh, but he would come in for a very short run. I think he got heat in WWE too. He was like the cruiserweight champion. Kid Cash. They did the Pit Bulls thing with him and Jamie Noble. Came out with the dog collars and all that. So good tribute there, I suppose. Stevie, always a versatile worker. Um, I think his most famous period was that Right to Censor run, right? With the short hair. I really liked his run as like the stooge valet for Victoria. That was like, again, that was my era, so to speak. She had a great presentation, made her feel like a big star among the women, and he helped with that a lot. Otherwise, like, I went back and watched his ECW run, and the build-up, because when I first watched Barry Legal, I thought, Stevie Richards, why the fuck is he in this triple threat main event match? But when I actually went back and watched on the good helmet tapes of the 90s, I did the 90s project for Easter Lariat on the Patreon. Watching his full run of promos and matches, it was actually really good. So he's actually kind of underrated too. Obviously, he was built as like a jobber a lot in WWE, but I thought he was a good one. The like Balls and Axel, they just suck. Like I don't have any love or affinity for them at all. Well, who else was there? Nova. Was he Simon Dean at this point? Like was he still doing that? I think I heard. Clue. Yeah, I think I heard someone say that he thought this sucked. Like going back to being Hollywood Nova, because Dean was like a good stooge heel, and it was away from all of this. So him going back felt like a step back. And Blue Meanie, I mean, he's a trip. Like I said, I don't know what to think half the time. So they go on, and we start the match. They're brawling all over the place. The Dudleys beat the shit out of Dreamer, and Joey's like, Tommy Dreamer getting his ass kicked. He needs to stick to his office job, because Dreamer worked backstage at the time, which I think Joey did too, but just come on to start commentating for Raw. We see the cheese grater on Dreamer, which gets a ton of blood here. And then Dreamer comes back with the cheese grater to the balls for Bubba. Like, the crowd loved that. It was a great spot. Sandman drop kicks Devon into a trash can for a near fall. And Foley starts busting out laughing. He's like, I don't mean to laugh, Joey, but I love stuff here. And so they go in. Bubba just destroys Sandman with an unprotected chair shot. Even the crowd's chanting holy shit at this. Lance Storm, just incredible. They run out to get involved as well. They go with some barbed wire. Incredible hits the tombstone. Francine comes in to kick Dreamer in the balls. And then suddenly Beulah McGillicuddy, no relation to Michael. He comes in, spears Francine. They do the cat fight. This is another stuff I've seen a million times. They did this all the time in ECW. Francine and Beulah would do the cat fight spots. The crowd loved it. Beulah then kicks Credible in the balls. Tommy Dreamer and Beulah, like, they come together, and husband and wife pair. They end up both hitting the DDT together. Beulah on Bubba too, which is very funny. They end up grabbing a street sign, stop sign in there. Bubba goes crazy with the kendo stick, and then they get to the tables, and Devon hits a powerbomb with Sandman through the table. Suddenly, Bubba gets a table and he like points to the back, and then Spike Dudley comes in with the tie-dye stuff. And they had been in act together at this point in WWE anyway, like all three of these like aligned on SmackDown. And he comes out, the crowd pops huge. They chant LSD, LSD for little Spike Dudley. He comes out, pours the lighter fluid on the table, set it on fire, and then Bubba powerbombs Dreamer through the flaming table for the win. What'd you think?
This was like just a fun party plunder match. Good main event after the real main event, dare I say. It got pretty much everyone you could imagine involved and in the ring and on the card. I think that Dudley Boys being such a WWE act versus Tanaka and Awesome is sort of what got them this spot. And the flaming table, insane. Like, that is a really fucking awesome bump. The amount of, like, here's the thing, with a lot of fire spots, like at least that I see, especially because I always see him in death matches, not just matches like this. The dude's hands are so bloody that they can never light the shit on fire. So it's always a really little flame or no flame at all. So to see it like absolutely just explode with flames, I was hyped.
Yeah, this is a great moment. I think this is, again, perfect for what they were going for and what it needed to be. This was like a total ECW nostalgia match with all four of these guys and all of the people running out. They got all of these weird cast of characters that ECW had that in many ways should have never have been stars or anything like that. But here they are getting their big moment. The stuff with the women was well done. The crowd loved all this stuff. You had the blood, you had the cheese grater. I really think this was just like a turn your brain off kind of match. Really, this whole show was kind of like that. If you look at it from that perspective, it was great. But afterwards, the Dudleys are pissed at Beulah. And suddenly Sandman rushes in with the kendo stick, bashes everyone with the head. And suddenly he's like, I want a beer. And then the glass shatters. It's stone cold. They cut to the WWE guys. They're like, what the fuck is he doing here? And Austin comes out, and Joey says, even I'm not brave enough to comment on what he's wearing. An XFL jersey. Here. Which, I mean, 2005? Like 2005, you're bringing out the Las Vegas like team jersey? What are you talking about, man? Like I said, like, why would you do this? Why would you bring back XFL for 2005? Although technically they did come back, later on. Like where they brought XFL back in like 2020. But even that, he came out with the Las Vegas Outlaws jersey as well. So big stuff there. No relation to Texas, but whatever. And he's all like, Sandman, I'm not just going to let you have a beer. I'm having a beer with every ECW man and woman here tonight. And so, like, he comes in, and they're like, but one thing we have to do first, before we start drinking, is to start fighting. And he's like, I want to see a fight, so let these WWE guys come into the ring to see if you can whip ECW's ass. And I'm just going to sit here and see what happens. Which is very... He then calls them cowards, because he's like, all Heyman did was talk shit on you boys, and you didn't do a damn thing about it. And he's like, Kurt, pull that finger out of your ass and fight. And I'm going to count backwards to 10. And if they don't come down here, I'm going to go up there and slap the piss out of every one of you. So he starts to count. And they all come to the ring. And Austin, who just criticized them for being cowards, immediately leaves before any fighting starts. They do the big lineup spot where they did a similar deal in the invasion, like the 2001 invasion angle, where all the ECW guys lined up on one side of the ring, and then the WWE guys came in on the other end, and then suddenly the crowd starts chanting for Taz, and they're like, we want Taz, we want Taz. And then Taz's like Survive If I Let You theme hits. He comes in, and he goes right after Kurt Angle, which was a nice callback. That was a very famous debut angle where Taz beat Kurt Angle and ended his streak, only to be buried immediately after because he got 2 over and WWE didn't like it, unfortunately. And they go in there, and then Joey says, that's Taz with only 1 Z. And then Joey comes in because suddenly Bischoff gets on like commentary, like gets my commentary, and Joey just like rants on Bischoff. And I bet Vince was like in his headset telling him to say all this stuff because he's like, "You're the worst promoter and the worst commentator I've ever seen in my life," and all this. He was going on, and everybody's brawling. Taz gets the Taz mission on Kurt. Everybody else is in the ring. Like the ECW guys just beat the shit out of the ECW guys. And this is when we see JBL like shoot on Blue Meanie. Bust him open, bloody him up. He beat the fuck out of him for real. And that led to a lawsuit against WWE. And in one of the all-time worst examples of being a mark, instead of getting a cash settlement, Blue Meanie demanded that he gets a singles win over JBL in court as a payment. Which did happen, to be fair. They brought BWO back for a run on SmackDown after this. And they did a match where, like, all of the BWO run, and this is a very famous chair shot where Stevie Richards just blasts JBL in the head with one of the worst chair shots ever. And at the time, he did an interview where he said that, like, I did it on purpose because JBL was a bully-ass bitch and all this. But since then, he's recanted that and said that it was actually not on purpose. Like, it was more of an angle. Just to get him over. He's like, even JBL thought it was to work it. But, yeah, what do you think of that? First of all, JBL shooting up meaningless battle royal, and then Blue Meanie getting a singles win over JBL in lieu of any settlement.
That's pro wrestling, baby. That is nuts.
Yeah, it is.
That is so nuts.
Oh, I mean, at heart, I still consider myself a wrestler deep down. But if this happened to me, it's just what we talked about on WrestleMania with the girl who got like stone cold bumped into on the ATV. If that had been me, like she got pissed off about it, and I don't even know what happened to that. Like they would have had to take me out on a stretcher because I would have claimed whiplash. I would have been on the ground, and I would have been begging you to back my story up. I was like, he saw it. Nello knows I'm telling the truth. He destroyed me with that ATV. Like I can't even move. Like there would be such a lawsuit if this happened to me and somebody. Well, I did have a little incident one single time. When I wrestled, there was a guy, Bonesaw McGraw, I wrestled. He was a friend of Hammerjack. There was another guy that was around my area at the time.
Isn't that the fucking guy from Spider-Man? Stop.
Yes, it's not Macho Man Randy Savage. It was a bald guy, like with the bad hair, and he wore a wife beater that he was probably like 150 pounds. Like I was bigger than him at like 14 or 15, pretty much. So what he did is, again, this was a small show, maybe 30 fans, 50 fans, like very small. And so somebody had a plate of nachos. I remember this directly. So Bonesaw McGraw's gimmick, my Bonesaw, he would take like a saw, like an actual saw, like there's one handle on the end and then the jagged to make a saw, and he would hit people with it with the flat end of it, and it always looked awful. Like it was because the saw would like wobble, like it would. There was no way it could hurt you. Pretty much the way he swung it. Occasionally he did cut people's heads with it. Never mind, thank God. But mainly he just hit him with the flat end, like but a very lame gimmick. But he had grabbed somebody's nachos in the crowd. I don't know if it was a girl at the time. I was a teenager. Maybe that riled me up or something. I don't know. But he grabbed somebody's nachos and like threw them to the ground and stomped on them. And I was super pissed at that because I was like, dude, like somebody like she had to pay like $5 for those nachos. Like they're gonna make people not come back next time. We've only got 20 fans here. Do you want us to have less? And I got really heated and like we were about to like go off the rails a little bit. I mean, remember, this is like lowest tier Southern Indie level of 2006. So we weren't exactly having a barn burner of a classic. Like don't let me fool you into that. But the match got messed up, and I worked a little stiff then, and we started to go at it a little bit, but it got broken up. I was just mad because he stole somebody's nachos, which is an unforgivable sin in my world. Like I said, $5, man. Those nachos were probably now it wouldn't be considered that high, but back then they were horrendously overpriced. How much did that hot dog you at that Arizona arena, Diamond Arena or whatever?
$7.50.
Look at that. And imagine if someone stole that from you and stomped on it. You'd be pissed,
I've always
right?
wondered, like, would I be able to just like walk back and be like, "Hey, one of the wrestlers threw my hot dog. Do I like get another one?" Or
I can promise you, M3 was not going to give any refunds. Mac Martinez, the one who ran the company, he was not going to give anybody any refunds. I can promise you that. Maybe with AEW they could pull that, but yeah. So I was very angry at that, and that was the closest I ever got to shooting or anything like that. But if that happened to me on WWE and somebody beat my ass for real, first of all, I would have shot back. Secondly, and that could have led to a whole other problem. But I would have sued the hell out of that company. Like that, they couldn't have promised me any amount of wins to do it. Like I think the only way you could do that is if you assured me that I would be champion, either coming in or coming out of WrestleMania. Like you promised me a main event spot because that could set me up for life if they did that. But not a win over a guy because it was a bullshit win that didn't mean anything. And I think he's another one that's got on the record saying he really regrets not going after money instead of going after the single win. And I'm sure JBL didn't even care.
Fuck, it's like the dumbest.
Yeah, I mean it was a terrible decision. But and the problem is JBL didn't give a fuck about that at all. Like that didn't hurt him at all. I can understand if you're being petty and you want to get revenge on him, but that didn't bother JBL. Like he's still a main eventer, and you're going to be fired in 2 months. On there, he should have taken the money. But this was still bullshit on JBL's part to shoot on him in the first place, just because he was drunk as fuck or whatever. So they run everybody out, and I think at the end of the day, Meanie and JBL did actually come back and like become friends again. Same thing with Joey Styles, who did knock JBL out for real backstage one time with one punch. That shows you a lot about JBL. But going on, Stone Cold takes JBL's cowboy hat and he's like, "Hey Mick, bring Bischoff's ass in here." So they throw Bischoff into the ring, and he's calling all these people to do big spots. The Dudleys hit the 3D. Austin calls out to Benoit to do the flying headbutt. He tells Ray to do a 619, and that crowd booed that again. They hate the 619, like the ECW audience. And Austin's like, "Eric, can you hear me? This is Eric. This is Austin." And he's like, "I want your thoughts on this wonderful evening." And Bischoff says, "Fuck ECW." And Austin hits the Stone Cold Stunner. And Stone Cold said, "This is the greatest night of my career, and I wish this would last forever." How is it the best night of your career? You weren't even in ECW for like, what, a month or two?
You just got to drink beer and how to do nothing else. They should have crucified Eric Bischoff here, just for Kurt Angle.
Oh, that could have caused so much problems if that had happened on this show. Yeah, but I don't know what's so great about this part for him. But anyway, the Dudleys grab Bischoff. They drag him to the parking lot, and everybody's celebrating. They toss him into the dumpster. And Styles is like, at the end, he's like, "The fans made this happen. Without you, there's no ECW. I can't believe what I'm seeing. ECW lives." And then Stone Cold and Sandman, they come together for one beer bash together at the top of the ramp to end the show. So what did you think about the post main event segment with the WWE guys getting their ass beat and Joey Styles having a heart attack seemingly on commentary and Bischoff getting tossed out like trash?
Um, Fun way to end the show. Again, like you just completely put over ECW in the most like crazy way. They whoop everyone's ass. They're all in the ring together. They're all drinking beer. Imagine if the ring collapsed like it did in that video
Yeah,
package. That would
yeah,
have
with
been
Public
fun.
Enemy. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yep. Um, I'd never seen that clip before, so that was really
Really? Because
yeah,
I've
that
seen that
was
a ton of times.
yeah, I'd never seen that before. I was like, oh shit. I can't believe no one got hurt, honestly. Pretty wild. But
It must have been so
yeah,
scary for them when all the fans were throwing the chairs in the ring. Like
dude.
I would have been freaking out over that if I
Yeah,
was in the
I'd
ring.
seen that before. But
Yeah,
super fun ending to the show. Like again, you just want to kill Bischoff in front of everyone. That's what's going to give them like their biggest satisfaction. ECW is celebrated big time, and you just bring them home like that. You know, Stone Cold is the most WWE guy that could probably get cheered by this crowd. And you have like objectively one of your biggest stars putting over ECW like insanely. So I thought that that was a really strong end to the show. And Stone Cold's speeches didn't feel as fabricated or performative as like a Paul Heyman or something like that.
I will say this: when he was cutting the promo, I agree with you. But watching the whole segment, I really think they were. And the reason I say that is because, like, during this segment where Bischoff was getting his just desserts, like, I really felt like Stone Cold didn't actually know anything about ECW really that much because he kept going to WWE guys that he knew. He would go to the Dudleys, then Benoit, then Ray, even though the crowd booed him. Like, he should have given up. They should have had some of the ECW guys do something, in my opinion, to Bischoff to end the show, like a Sandman or Sabu, maybe somebody like that. One of the Invaders to like build that up some. But he just kept going to the WWE guys. But I mean, it was a feel good segment. Everybody loves Stone Cold. It doesn't matter that he wasn't really an ECW guy. Like, it was cool that he was able to put them over. And you have to give them some credit, like, as a company. And it makes me not understand why couldn't we have had this way of thinking for the actual invasion with WCW? Because in that storyline, the egos of WWE and Vince were so out of control and fucked up that they ruined what should have been one of the biggest storylines of all time. Because they didn't want to bring the guys over, because they didn't want to change how they were, they didn't want to show any ass or make WCW feel like equals. They were so paranoid about that in 2001. But here, in One Night Stand, they didn't just make them seem like equals. The ECW guys dominated your main event players, like Angle, JBL, Edge. They were some of your top stars on TV. Um, I just wonder why they were so giving, like, to ECW, like, instead of how it was 4 years prior. Maybe it was because this was just a one-off show, and they didn't think that much about it. They just figured maybe they just figured, hey, these like our regular fans, like the regular WWE fans of 2005, if they watch this show, they will not watch this ECW show. Pretty much, like, they'll watch our show, but not the ECW show. Nobody cares about ECW, and it turned out they were obviously wrong because this drew such a good number and the DVD sales were so high. But still, I could see their ego being so high. They're like, well, we can give the ECW fans what they want because our fans don't care about ECW, even though they kind of did. And it felt like a huge deal. I know at the time, this got a ton of like publicity and stuff online. And I think they really had something here where they could have, if they had like restarted ECW after this show instead of next year's, I think that could have changed the course of ECW history because like ECW craze was on a huge high at the time. I think that would have changed everything if they could have, because they could have gotten a better TV deal probably. They could have gotten a deal where, they're not on Sci-Fi and they have all these weird demands. Like I said, when we do next year's show, we may talk about that a little bit more in depth. But my main point is, I really felt like you had a hot brand here and a hot level of content for ECW after this show. Do you agree with that? Do you think this could have been something if they had started it, next, June 14th or whatever, the next, Tuesday?
No, like because the crowd is such an integral part of the experience, and I
Yeah.
don't think that you're getting that audience unless you do like a residency somewhere,
Good
like
point.
an NXT does.
Yeah.
But that's to say, yeah, like I think that there was magic on this night, but when you try to just start to, you know, like push that and push that and push that and make it into something else, I feel like that's when you're kind of going against the grain. Like it wasn't meant to be this. It's called One Night Stand for a reason.
Yeah, like I do get where you're coming from on that, but at the very least, maybe we would not have gotten the zombie if it started in 2005 instead of 2006. Is that not worth anything to you?
No.
Fine. Maybe you like the zombie. I'm not judging you if you did. I'm not judging zombie fans on this show.
The ECW zombie.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna judge ECW zombie fans. Come on now. So the thing is, another thing that hurt is that they, like I said, I know that the next Raw got a huge rating. I was doing research on this because I wanted to study it a little bit. The next Raw, the next night, was a show that was built around the draft. And they didn't do the draft like they did the year prior or the first time or how they do it nowadays. Now it was like each brand would get 5 picks and every week a new guy would get revealed in 2005. So let's run down this show. Let's say that you are an ECW fan and you watch ECW and you think, damn, ECW's back. They did the big angle on Raw. What are they going to do to follow up this amazing show? You hear the storylines and the reporting going on that it was a great success. What are they going to do? And you tuned in to Monday Night Raw. What you would see on that show is, first of all, Muhammad Hassan coming out, taking on Shelton Benjamin. To which Hassan would win by DQ because Stone Cold hit a stunner on him. They had a beer bash. You ended up having Jericho team with John Cena versus Triple H. And, no, not Triple H. Tyson, Tomko, and Christian. Because Cena debuted the week prior. So they go on and on. You got a Master Lock challenge with Chris Masters and Sergeant Slaughter. They're pushing Chris Masters, like green Chris Masters. You get a Diva Search segment here. This is one of the first ones. Pretty much. This was the one where Ashley Massaro won. Rest in peace. There. You get Maven versus Viscera. Kane versus Sylvain Grenier. What would you say? And then a main event segment with the main event was just a Jericho segment. So they were building up to
probably be like, this isn't for me.
Who is this for? Kane and Sylvain? Yeah, look, what were they thinking? Honestly, like I don't want to follow up ECW One Night Stand, What were they thinking? Viscera, Maven, Kane, and Sylvan? What the fuck? Like, who would watch this? And this did a huge rating. I bet the next week had a massive drop. Or maybe not a massive drop, but a drop nonetheless. Because they could not have been happy. If you were an ECW fan and you watched this show, you were probably thinking, man, I'm never watching this shit again.
Yep.
It was a weird time in 2005. This was during the Spike TV era. They hadn't gone back to USA yet. But yeah, you at least got, we got Cena coming over to Raw, but for an ECW fan, I don't care. But even for a regular fan, this era of Raw totally blew when you think about it. Like we're at the down stage of Raw being good, because 04 Raw, I will maintain, was a good show. Maybe up until they brought Eugene. But the stuff with Shelton and all that, I love the IC title scene with Jericho, Christian. All of that was great. All the stuff I said before. But regardless, I hope that I would have hoped that they had learned a lesson about this. But the year that came after, I remember it being what it was, and they showed respect to ECW then too. What would be like a modern version of this? Like, obviously, you can't go back to ECW nostalgia because it's been so far done to death and it's been a long time. Is there any kind of nostalgia type of show that could work in now that either WWE or AEW or even an indie could do, like a tribute type of show like this? That would be maybe it couldn't capture this exact vibe, but it would feel like a big deal at least.
I mean, GCW's Hammerstein shows for sure. The Gaiaism Decade of Recorder Century event was really incredible.
Yeah, that was good in Japan. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's just those one-offs. Which the thing is that when a lot of the talent is too old for in-ring competition anymore, how do you do it?
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why that doesn't really work for me as much. Like, even the GCW shows. Like, I get what they're going for, but it's so far gone. Obviously a WCW would never work at this point. And stuff like Ring of Honor is already around, even though it's so different from what it was. Like, that's kind of the closest thing I could think of. If it's like, if AEW did a specific Ring of Honor tribute show, like, for the real Ring of Honor, not the one they have now, but the one with like Bryan Danielson and Nigel were the world champion, Morishima, all that bullshit. And by bullshit, I say it lovingly because I love all that stuff. Like, that's the closest thing I could think of that would like, oh, they're bringing the old school Ring of Honor back for. If they wanted to put effort into it like that, I don't think they care enough to do that. But if they did, I think that's about the closest we could get. Have it in Philly.
So what did you think overall of the show?
I think the vibe was immaculate. Like, they did it perfectly, but the main MVP of it was still the fans to me, more than anything else. I think that the show itself was not that special, like, in my opinion. Outside of the one match with Awesome Tanaka. But this night was not about the in-ring quality. It was about reliving ECW for what a lot of people thought would be the last time. Going into it, they never knew there would be a second one, let alone that it would come back as a brand. Like, so when you look at it in that context, it's an amazing show that I bet a lot of ECW fans. And I bet a lot of ECW fans were surprised that they didn't fuck this up. And like I said, at the end of the show, they could have easily have just buried ECW at the end and tried to overpower everybody. But they didn't do it. Like, they showed ECW true respect. They let the fans have their moments, and they let these ECW originals have their moment. And I think it's a very special night for those fans. But as somebody who has no real love for ECW on a personal level, they've had some stuff that I appreciate, that I really like as a fan. Surely. I'm not going to even try and lie and say that I didn't. But I'm not somebody who grew up in going to Hammerstein or the ECW arena when I was a teenager and loving everything. I don't have that experience. So for me as a fan, I thought it was a really fun nostalgia trip to look back on stuff that, again, a lot of this stuff on this show, let alone the 90s, that just would not fly in 2025. So I think that was a lot of fun. But as a show itself, it wasn't really one of my favorites. It's like a 7 out of 10 show, like upgraded to an 8 because of the fans, to me. What did you think? It's got a 9.10 on Cage Match, so clearly a lot of inmates hold this show near and dear to their heart. And I've seen many people say this is one of the greatest shows of all time.
Yeah, I agree a lot with you in terms of objective and subjectively speaking. It's a very special and passionate atmosphere that I think has rarely been replicated. Do I think it's one of the greatest? It's like a really great tribute event, by far, probably one of the best tribute events. But like as a wrestling show, there really isn't anything besides Mike Awesome, Masato Tanaka that I probably ever go back to watch, because there's going to be such better matches involving all of these other ECW guys.
I agree with that. I think you could probably find like better versions of all of these matches from the 90s ultimately.
Yep.
But it's the vibes of it that make it special. But like if you could probably like cut together a compilation purely of these matches from the 90s, and you could create a dynamite show, like an excellent show, and it would really be crazy. But as it is, like I think that, you know, like I said, I mean, you had the great car crash, Awesome Tanaka match. Everything else was just kept short. Like, you know, like they rushed it, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the pace was great. It's like a 2.5 hour show, like you said, on there. I think they could have used giving the 3-way dance some more space, and maybe one of the other singles matches, either Benoit and Eddie or Ray and Psychosis, from a pure wrestling perspective, and try to bring that in. Because I don't think this show really had that, and that's something that's always talked about by ECW loyalists as this big deal, that they had everything. They had, you know, technical wrestling and all that stuff too. It's just the extreme part gets publicized more. But you didn't really see that. Like, and on top of it, while I do think that the WWE Invasion storyline was done very well, and I repeat what I said earlier, that I liked that the show had this string of a storyline that like a thread that followed the whole show. I did think that was cool. But for the ECW show, I could see why you may just want it to be a pure, like it's not as much of a pure ECW show as it could be. But like I said, I think it really ultimately helped it, because it gave the fans villains to hate, you know, and these outsiders. Just like any great sports rivalry, like you want to root for the home team and against the you know, the rivals. Here, you root for the underdog ECW versus the corporation that doesn't represent you as an underground 90s, you know, fan or child or whatever. So I think it totally worked, and I think it was great on that end. But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't say it's one of the greats. I'd say an 8 out of 10 rating for me.
Yeah, I'd go 8 out of 10 as well. And well said about the having an antagonist and a through line, just because it's they weren't really going to boo people in the ring or on the card, because they really were all ECW people for the most part. So it was having that third party antagonistic source that I think really helped.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at the main event. They were all baby faces, ultimately. But, you know, still, though, really enjoyed running down the show with you. And hopefully everybody out there likes it. All the listeners like it. I think it's really cool that we got the chance to do something like this. This, like I said, I never would have imagined that ECW would have been what we go to. That's something that it's never really resonated with me. But I enjoyed it. Like, I really enjoyed this look back at this nostalgia trip in history, and enjoyed doing it with you especially. And I love that we could, you know, add so much time of you shitting on the Red Hot Chili. I didn't expect that from you, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Even Danny California.
Great Nick Cave quote. Great quote.
I know you were proud of that, and I'm proud of you for it, to be honest. But with that said, we are out for now. Next week, we got some stuff to talk about anyway. Money in the Bank's coming up. I have a hard time believing that will come even close to this One Night Stand show, to be honest. Even if I don't love it, I think it's going to be better than what we see, probably, or at least more memorable. Than yet another show built around ladder matches, which in 2025, maybe in 2005, I would have been into that. Coming off again, I always said the original Money in the Bank is one of my absolute favorite matches as a fan. I'm not saying it's one of the greatest, but I'm saying my personal favorite matches. That is way up there. The match that inspired me to wrestle in the first place. But in 2025, I don't need more of them in my life. But they will not stop, no matter how much I protested. And we will talk about it, and it should be fun. So with that said, as always, Nello, I need you to bring this home for us. We're at the 1 yard line. I'm handing it to you up the middle. Say anything you want that's on your heart, your mind. I don't care what it is. Has to do with wrestling, has to do you. It can be anything you want. But it needs to come from your heart. Now tell the people.
Thank you, R-Truth, for everything.
That's true.
That's all.
R-Truth released. Thank you, R-Truth. And thank you all for listening to the show. I cannot wait to be back next week. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, you know I love you. And until next time, this has been your Wrestle Update.
In the state of Mississippi, Papa was a copper and the mama was a hippie. In Alabama, she was swinging a hammer. Price you gotta pay when you break the panorama. She never knew that there was anything more than gold. What in the world does your company take me for? Black bandana, sweet Louisiana, robbing on a bank in the state of Indiana. She's a runner, rebel and a stunner. On the merry way saying, baby, what you gonna? Looking down the barrel of a hot metal 45, just another way to survive. California, rest in peace. Simultaneous release. California, show your teeth. She's my priestess. I'm your priest. Yeah, yeah. She's a lover, baby, and a fighter. Should've seen it coming when it got a little brighter. With a name like Day in California, day was gonna come when I was gonna mourn ya. A little loaded, she was stealing another breath. I love my baby to death. California, rest in peace. Simultaneous release. California, show your teeth. She's my priestess. I'm your priest. Yeah, yeah. Who knew that all this time? Who knew that all this time? Did you say goodbye? Did you say? Push the fader, gifted animator, one for the now and 11 for the later. Never made it up to Minnesota. North Dakota man with a gun for the quota. Down in the Badlands, she was saving